Hello, this is the Stories Beside channel. I release videos every day for you. Subscribe and click the bell.
Wendy, did you bring the presents? Yes, Mason. They're all stacked in your car. What about the tree? Our boys went in this morning, and at lunchtime the boys left to put it up. Mason looked at his watch. He had calculated everything correctly. Today from morning the whole orphanage, headed by the director, was entertained. The youngest ones were first at the theater, then at the children's playroom, and the older ones were skiing at one of the campgrounds that Mason owned. As soon as the children left, work boiled over at the orphanage. The Christmas tree was brought in and set up. The girls have to decorate the assembly hall, dress up the Christmas tree. In the evening after their return, the children will have dinner and go to bed, but in the morning there will be a feast. Mason grinned. Probably it should be considered lucky that they have a small orphanage in their town, only 50 kids. If there were 200 kids, he wouldn't be able to give them such a party. The phone vibrated in his pocket, and Mason picked it up without looking. Mason, what is all this? He wrinkled his nose and moved the phone away from his ear a little. Lisa, what's the matter again? What's got you so upset? Lisa was his fiancée, or rather, Lisa thought she was his fiancée. He kept quiet, didn't say yes or no, just observed, just realized that he was already 27, and it was probably time to get married, but probably not for sure. Yes, he appreciated her for coming to follow him from the capital, but only at first, because then he realized that Lisa was sure of his return. She said more and more often, "Isn't it time to make peace with your father so that he can bring you back from exile?" Lisa, what makes you think your father and I had a fight? I like it here. I don't want to go back. Of course, you're going to live here all your life, aren't you? Actually, that's exactly what I intend to do. Lisa looked at him, smiling, and showed him that she didn't believe him at all. He didn't. In general, Lisa seemed to him a doll, and the more they were together, the more he became convinced that she had no brains and that her brains were made up of money signs. She was the daughter of a rather large businessman. Mason had met her at the birthday party of one of the Shins of the Golden Youth. As much as he did not like such parties, but sometimes had to still go out in the light. Lisa at once, you could say, hung on him. Mason did not take any active actions, because Lisa took everything on herself the same evening. They slept together in her one-room apartment. Lisa was beautiful, perhaps too beautiful. And even then he had thought her looks were reminiscent of a Barbie doll, but had found it rather interesting. Now emphasizing the resemblance to a doll was causing him a very different emotion. What upset me? It upset me that my fiancé is an idiot. Mason grimaced. He hated it when people stepped out of line, even if it was the people he lived next to. And yet, Mason, why are you playing the fool? I've been telling you for a week that I want to throw a great party, and you've been pussyfooting around like it's your last dime. And today, I find out you're throwing another party for those punk kids. I don't think it's any of your business for one. You want a party, have a party, but not in my house and not on my dime. That's two. And third, and most importantly, Lisa, I think it's time for you to come home. She even choked with indignation. Home? Oh, so that's it. So you used me and now you don't need me anymore. Did I ever tell you I needed you? It was only your wish to come here. You didn't even ask me if I needed you. You just came and moved into my house. Lisa hung up, and Mason sighed. Why did it have to be like this? He'd come back to this town because he'd once had to spend 2 years in this very orphanage. The memories were hard. If it wasn't for the principal and the tutors, it was unlikely he would ever have the chance to go home to his father. Mason sat up. His legs grew heavy, and the hammers rattled in his head. It always did when he thought back to that time. Mason's father had been one of the first to catch the right jet stream during the lean years. Literally in a year, he turned from an ordinary engineer into a real owner of factories, newspapers, steamships. Along with wealth came problems in the form of competitors. Christopher realized that the competitors are capable of much, but to get a grip on life, he was very insistently asked to give up the lemonade factory. Someone needed it to produce Pal, a very popular drink at the time. But Christopher didn't like to back down when there was no good reason to do so. They started making threatening phone calls to his wife. She was terribly worried, not so much for herself as for her son, but her husband convinced her that it was all just psychological pressure. She had always believed her husband. They were attacked while Slava and Mason were walking in the park. Slava fought to the last for her son. I guess she didn't mean to get hurt. It just happened. It turned out that in order to take the child away from the mother, she had to be sent to the other world. Christopher found out almost immediately, not even 15 minutes later. All his people rushed to look for those who could take his son away, and he himself rushed to the hospital where his wife was taken, but he only managed to hear, "Christopher, save him." Clara closed her eyes, and Christopher put a barrel to the doctor's head. At that time, few businessmen did not have such a toy. "Save her, save her." The doctor turned pale, but he didn't take his eyes away. "She's gone. There's nothing we can do." For another minute, Christopher stared at him, then lowered the trunk, and himself knelt beside the pastel of his Clara. The search for Mason had been going on for over 3 months. A very active search. Then, of course, they'd been going on too, but not at such a rapid pace. The investigator averted his eyes. Christopher himself, of course, realized that with each passing day, the hope of finding Mason alive was diminishing. Mason was brought to some kind of children's hospital. The boy almost did not speak, looked at everyone with hunted eyes. All his body was covered with bruises. He did not remember anything from the word at all. Apparently, his brain had put up such a block, either from what happened in front of his eyes with his mother, or for some other reason. And apparently there were plenty of them. Mason remembered how scary it was for him, even though he was only 5 years old, but the horror in his soul was inhuman. And it was even scarier because he remembered nothing at all. Some blackness in his head. Then he was transferred to an orphanage in this small town, which was 600 kilometers away from his native home. He was alone, small, almost family, where the educators worked hard. It took them 2 years before Mason began to die off. He remembers that time, waking up, eating breakfast, and sitting by the window. Mason was waiting, only he didn't know what, but he knew he just had to wait. One day it was Christmas. Something happened that somehow shook Mason's mind. A Christmas tree was brought to the orphanage, not very thick, a little crooked, but a real one. The teachers brought some toys from home, made garlands with the children, and one day all the children began to decorate it. Mason took a toy too. It was a small ball with tinfoil stars inside. He raised his hand and froze. It was the kind of balloons his mom loved. She always said there were snowflakes inside. Mom was gone. Mason realized it clearly now, and Daddy was gone too, because Mason had lost him. He dropped the balloon, which shattered loudly, and covered his face with his hands. The kindergarten teacher rushed over to him. She saw how the boy turned pale, how his hands shook. "Mason, what happened?" He looked at her with frantic eyes and repeated, My mom was ruined." Mason was then urgently taken to their doctor, Vanessa. He talked for a long time, with his eyes closed, telling Vanessa everything that came into his head. After an hour, she was forced to give Mason a sedative injection. When the boy fell asleep, Vanessa went to the principal's office. "We need to see a 2-year-old summary of New York City. I understand that Mason's dad is a rich man and his mom died in front of him when they tried to take the boy away. I'm sure we'll find something. But it's so far away." "I understand." A few hours later, the woman had Christopher's cell phone number in her hand. It was Jenna who called him. "Christopher?" "Yes, you have a call from the orphanage." The voice she heard on the phone was metallic, and Jenna was even a little confused. She was not so long ago the director and did not quite know how to put herself in the right way. "What orphanage?" She began to quickly tell the story of Mason. The man interrupted her. "Had the police been notified now?" "Not yet. We thought we'd talk to you first." "Don't report it. I'm on my way." Jenna hung up the phone and looked at Vanessa confused. "Whoa. What is it?" "He said he was on his way and that the police hadn't been notified yet." "Why not?" "I don't know." "What if it's not him?" "It's one of the ones, Ho." Vanessa stopped being scared, but a couple hours later, they did call the police. Christopher's senses were very heightened after everything that had happened. As soon as the woman's voice said that they were calling from the orphanage, his heart sank. He could not have listened further because he was sure Mason had been found, but then another thought came into his head, and if the police of that city had hidden the fact of finding a similar child, and the photos of the boy had been sent all over the country, then perhaps it was not so simple. Perhaps the people who took Mason away are connected to or paid off by the men in shoulder straps. The fact that Mason was found is very good, but also dangerous for the boy. Christopher has driven the driver up several times. "John, I'm asking you to step on the gas." John sighed. "Christopher, you know I am a good driver. On these roads, 130 kilometers per hour is the limit, I assure you. There's no telling what will happen to the cars after this race." "John, to hell with the cars. Let's buy new ones." "Yes, new cars. Will you buy yourself?" "Trust me, it's more dangerous." Christopher sighed. He knew John well, realized that he was telling the truth because the road really left much to be desired. A security car was following them literally 5 meters away, and Christopher had brought them with him precisely because he had too many questions. The cops arrived after another 2 o'clock. Jenna was very surprised when one of them said that they should take the boy with them. "That's out of the question. We're in charge of him, and until we have the proper orders, he is not getting out of here." One of the men who had arrived gave her an unkind look. "I don't understand now. Are you challenging the orders of the police?" Jenna looked at him confusedly, then said, "Show me your ID. I'll call your superiors." The other suddenly pinned the principal against the wall. "Get the boy over here quickly." Vanessa rushed to help the supervisor, but she was immediately shoved aside. She would have fallen if someone hadn't picked her up. The people who identified themselves as police officers were already lying on the floor, pinned down by tough guys. In front of Jenna stood a man. "I told you not to call the police, but I thought I had to. What if you're the one who massacred the boy's mom?" Christopher twitched. "Does Mason know the mom's gone?" "Yes, he remembered everything yesterday, and I told you before that. Where is he now?" Christopher felt that he had to see his son urgently had to hug him. Otherwise he would go crazy. "He's asleep." The boy had to be sedated. Christopher did not have time to ask anything else. There was a shrill scream in the hallway. "Daddy, Daddy." The man turned slowly and saw Mason. He came out of some door and looked at Christopher with tear-filled eyes. "Son?" Christopher walked down the hall, and Mason ran toward him. He grabbed his son. pulled him against him. Mason, my son. They were never apart again. Mason had to recover for a long time. For a long time he screamed at night, woke up from nightmares, but his father was always near. He took his son to the sea, taught him to ski. They spent a lot of time together. School began, and the child's thoughts shifted a little, and when he was already in the 2nd grade, he turned to his father. "Dad, can you talk to me?" Christopher tore himself away from his papers. "Sure. Is something wrong?" Mason sat down next to him. "You know, Dad, it's Christmas soon, and it was supposed to be Christmas at the orphanage when you found me. There were no presents there, or rather, we glued something ourselves and put it under the tree for others, but all the kids expect that the gift is the parents. I got such a gift, and they got nothing. Maybe we could go there. I looked, I have lots of toys, and we would definitely get enough for everyone." Christopher looked at his son carefully. "Are you ready to part with your toys and give them to those kids?" "Yes, Dad. Janet is very nice, and everyone is nice, but there are no toys there at all old, broken." Christopher cradled his son in his arms. "Sure, Mason will go. You don't have to take your toys. I'll buy them." Mason pulled away. "Dad, but it's expensive." "Not more expensive than money, son." Mason hugged him with both arms. "You're the best dad." His father grumbled annoyingly, his eyes watering for some reason. When they got to the orphanage, Mason froze. He looked at everything carefully, and Christopher couldn't understand what his son was thinking. Jenna came outside. She looked in surprise at the big car, more like a bus. When Christopher came out from behind the wheel, the woman smiled confusedly. "Is that you? Is there something wrong with Mason?" Mason quickly jumped out and rushed to her and hugged her, and she hugged him back, even crying. "Mason, you've grown so much. I can't even recognize you. You know, Jenna, I'm getting straight A's in school." Christopher smiled. "What about the B's in behavior?" Mason waved him off. "Daddy, it's not studying. It's just behavior, and I'll get better, that's for sure." Jenna laughed. "Of course you will. In fact, I'll tell you in confidence that a B in behavior is a very good grade." She straightened up and looked at Christopher. "Then I don't understand at all. You're just visiting us? Well, you could say that Mason missed you. Come on in, we'd all be happy to. Mason, you remember Emily, don't you? She used to follow you around all the time." "I remember. Did they take her away?" "Not yet, but you're just in time. She has an aunt, and after Christmas, Emily will go to her family." Mason smiled. She was looking forward to it. "Oh, Liam, remember? The one who fought all the time?" "Yeah. We put him in a club, and the coach says he's going to be a good athlete." "That's great." Mason was smiling, and so was Christopher. His son so rarely smiled. "Jenna, we're not here empty-handed here. Is there someone to unload? Will you help?" He pushed the door, and in the view of the astonished teacher appeared the car interior, densely packed with boxes and bags. "What's this?" She came closer, took one of the boxes. A car, took another, a board game. "What's this?" "Are these toys for Christmas?" "Well, it's not just toys and books and some clothes. It's Christmas." Christopher smiled embarrassedly. As it turns out, it's not so easy to give gifts completely and selfishly. It only seems to be the right thing to do, but when he looked into Jenna's eyes, he drowned there. They were grateful, surprised, moist, glistening. He could go on endlessly with words to describe her eyes, but she looked away. Christopher had time to think. After all, she's just over 30 and already a principal. They decided to unload the presents, not immediately, but after the children had gone to bed, so that they wouldn't see them. Everyone helped, the teachers, nannies, even the watchman, and Grandfather Sebastian. Jenna rejoiced like a child. How many dolls? We have more girls, and there are almost no decent dolls left, so they sit in line to play. Christopher realized this was true, and it made him feel so bad. Why do children have to sit in line to play with some old doll? The next day, Christopher saw the boy's eyes light up. He'd never been much of a sentimentalist, but here, he decided that he would come here with Mason every Christmas. That's what they did, and they were welcomed, as Christopher himself said, as much as he'd ever been welcomed. When Mason turned 20, his dad started to slowly bring him into his company. And it had to be said, Mason was doing just fine. Christopher was smiling. You know, son, you're gonna be good. I know and I can see it. Mason turned 23, and his father started talking about expanding. You know, Mason, I think the two of us together, we could make it big. As long as I'm on the clock, we can do a lot of things. Dad, what are you doing? You're not going to make yourself an old man, are you? Well, no, not right now, but believe me, that time will come very quickly, so much so that I won't even know it. Come on, you'll always be young. And as for expansion, I have an idea. I've been doing some research on where there are fewer people like us, and I know what I want to suggest. Christopher sat down next to his son, who was spreading out papers on the table. Well, show me. I see you've done a lot of preparation. Yeah, I had to sit for a while. I even thought that those who've been in business before are the real heroes. Why is that? Because there was no internet, and you had to wait weeks for every answer or travel, and you couldn't gather information that fast anyway. Christopher smiled. That's where you're right. Everything is too fast now, no fun. They sat up late into the night, and when they were done, his father looked at Mason. You're good. If you find a suitable room, go ahead. Of course I'll help you, but that land will be yours. We'll make a branch, and it's all in your hands. You want me to be the branch manager. Well, Dad, I don't have much experience, do I? I didn't have any when I started, and I was almost as old as you are now. So, son, go ahead. The town greeted Mason with beautiful spring weather. He was glad to get out of the car and stretch. It felt good. Yes, it did feel good. The leaves were just opening and apparently smelled of something, some kind of freshness or something. And the breeze, almost imperceptible, but so pleasant, carried the smell to everyone. Mason smiled. Apparently, it smells like spring. He didn't remember what it was like here in spring, or he didn't go for walks in the orphanage, or he did, but he forgot, and he and his father used to come here only in winter, always under Christmas. By the way, Mason made a wish that this Christmas he himself would come to the orphanage with presents, or rather, that he would earn them himself. His father had always been in the grocery business, but Mason decided to expand and open not only stores with their products, but also to try himself in the restaurant business. It was something he had always wanted to do. Dad thought about it for a while and said, Well, I cannot forbid you, especially since I find the idea very interesting. And here's Mason here. In the car, a few business plans, over which he sat for a long time. Now it is necessary to rent a place, and everything else later. He didn't want to go to a hotel. He understood very well what kind of service there was. Mason got into the car, dialed Jenna's number. Good afternoon. Mason, hello. It's so good to hear from you. Jenna, I'm not far from the orphanage. Is it okay if I stop by for coffee? Mason, but why do you ask? Sure, come on over. Did something happen to you? No, I'm fine. All right. Well, come on over. Mason parked the car, went to the candy store, bought a cake. "Hello, Mason." Jenna rushed over to hug him. "How are you visiting us and not on Christmas Day?" she asked, while she quickly set the table. "I knew it. I bought your favorite pies on the way here today. I'm here on business. We want to open a branch here." Jenna sat down and thought about it. "I don't know what to say to that. I think it's very good. There's not much work in our city. Young people have no place to go. Why here? There are bigger cities nearby. The thing is, this town's in the middle. It's convenient to all those towns. You're right, I never really thought about it. Dad said the same thing." Jenna suddenly flared up as if she were in her early 20s instead of her 50s. "How's Christopher?" "He's fine. He sends his love. Him too." Jenna was silent, staring out the window. And Mason thought he never knew if she was married or not. "Jenna, I wish I had an apartment, someone to iron and cook for. 'Cause I don't have any time at all." "Sure, I'll pay you very well." "Wait a minute, let me think about it." For a while, Jenna sat in silence, tapping her pen on the table. "I think I can help you. We used to have an elderly woman working as a janitor. It got hard, so she left. Very clean, quiet, worked because she had a big apartment and the utilities ate up all her payments. I'll look up her number." 10 minutes later, Jenna called. "Good afternoon, Miranda. Did you recognize her? How's your health? How are you?" She listened for a while, nodding, then spoke again. "Miranda, I seem to recall you have a large apartment. I have an acquaintance coming into town, looking for a place to rent with someone to look after him." She laughed. "No, of course he's an adult. It's just that he has a lot of work to do, and you have to eat. You have to wear clean shirts." Yeah, okay. "Well, I'll give him your address. He'll be right over." She hung up. "Well, I think you're going to like Miranda." Mason stood up. "Thank you, Jenna. You've been a great help to me then and now. Come on, Mason. You do so much for us, for our orphanage." He had already reached the door, and then he turned around. "Say, I never knew. Are you married? Do you have children?" Jenna looked at him carefully, then sighed. "No. First I studied, then I went to work. My heart ached for my children. My beau considered me for crazy and ran away. I couldn't dry my tears for the first few years. Here at work, I kept to myself so that the children wouldn't see me. And when I went out, I cried immediately. So many broken fates, such terrible stories. I kept thinking later, and then I looked back, and that's it. The train has left, but I'm not upset. Men, it's not so important. It's the children that matter. These little people who have already received a portion of betrayal at that age." Mason saw how hard it was for her to say the words. He knew exactly what she meant. Watching Jenna, she's always like a hen with the kids, and they're all clinging to her. Even if there is noise, it is enough for her just to say something softly, and everyone is silent and listens to her. They say such a teacher from God. You are the best woman and kinder than you I certainly have not met. On impulse, Mason reached back and hugged Jenna. She immediately pulled out a handkerchief, sniffled. "Oh, come on, get out of here. Miranda's probably waiting in there." Mason left the office and headed for the car. I wondered if his father had noticed how the principal was reacting to him. He immediately pulled out his cell phone. "Dad, hi. I made it, of course you did. Just got off the phone with Jenna." And it seemed to him or his father's voice trembled. Mason talked to him a little longer and disconnected, and stopped at the car. I may be a fool, but it seems my father is even more foolish. He pulled into the yard of an old house. Not old. It was obvious that the house was being watched, but exactly old, even the stucco over the porches and under the windows. Wow! Is this a real monument? I haven't lived in a monument yet. Apparently, Mason was looking around too obviously, so he even got the attention of some old lady. Do you like it? He turned around, and there was a little old woman standing next to him, her eyes quite young, mischievous, and like a dried mushroom. Very much. I wonder how old this house is? And you open your eyes wider, and you will see the date of construction. The old woman smiled, flashing her teeth. Mason was not even surprised at her teeth when he saw what she was talking about. He laughed at once. Not noticing the 2-meter-high letters on the wall was an effort. Wow, he's over 100 years old. But he didn't. He did. Tell me, Grandma, how do I find Miranda? I'm not even 80 yet. I'll be 80 next year. And Miranda, I've been waiting for you for half an hour. I don't know what road you took. You can drive around the city in 15 minutes. He laughed again. He liked Miranda very much. Please forgive me. It's so beautiful that I was delayed. I'm often in the city, but I've never been in the spring. The woman softened. Yes, our town is beautiful. You are right, and the fact that you often come here, I know. I recognized you. You and your dad came here when I was on shift. I know why you come. Mason didn't say anything. The old woman didn't need an answer. She stood in front of him in the driveway. Don't think. My house is clean and nice. I do a lot of things myself, but my granddaughter scolds me and tells me to wait for her. Mason could barely keep up with the old lady. You have a granddaughter, too? I do. I'm normal. Why shouldn't I have a granddaughter? Does she live with you? No, she's independent. She's 20 years old, and she's working, helping my old lady. He sighed with relief. So no one will be in the way. You can work and rest in peace. Not that Mason was so against everyone, but he realized that there would be a lot of work. When they entered the apartment, he looked around with interest. Time seemed to have stopped in this apartment a long time ago, maybe back in the post-war years. The antique furniture, the paintings on the walls, how old were they? He wouldn't be surprised if the paintings were more expensive than this apartment. But come on, I got 4 rooms. 1 big one and 3 smaller ones. 1 is my bedroom and 2 are empty. This one's bigger and brighter. I think you'll be comfortable in it. It really was a cozy room. A big bed, also from some prehistoric time, sturdy, solid, and the closet was huge. Mason even thought that if they ever wanted to take it out, it would take more than 2 movers. The desk, he even leaned over. It was. Instead of legs, the table has tiger paws. Yes, it's interesting here. The old woman grinned. What's interesting? Just old stuff. It was obvious that she said she didn't mean it. She loved her home. Let's go on. He followed her again. Here's the bathroom, the toilet, and here's the kitchen. By the way, you write me a schedule of when and what to feed you. Just buy food, because I mostly eat porridge and potatoes. Mason nodded with a smile. He wondered what the old woman had worked as before. It seemed to him that she had been a supervisor or a foreman of some kind. Mason didn't know why a foreman. That's just the way it seemed to him. He brought the stuff out of the car, laid it out, pulled out his laptop. We need to see what cafes and restaurants are already here, then go and see what they feed. About a couple hours later, Miranda knocked on the door. Mason, you still haven't texted me anything about the food. Let's get off work and go have tea and figure this out. He pushed his laptop away. Miranda was right. We should do things in order. They drank delicious tea with some unbelievably delicious scones and talked. Miranda, I'm an omnivore. I can be fed anything. I'll get up at various times, but no later than 8. I can heat it up myself if I need to. Don't even think about it. I'll charge him and he'll heat his own food. No. Let me leave you money for groceries and you buy what you need. I don't really like shopping. I get enough of it at work. That's good. So you don't care about cooking? Yes, absolutely. He put the money on the table. The old woman looked at it in surprise. This is for 6 months? Now Mason was surprised. Why for 6 months? For 2, 3 weeks, you name it, as more will be needed. Delicacies will have to be bought. He laughed. Miranda talked in a very interesting way. She didn't try to replace phrases or words with more streamlined ones, but most importantly, she had such lively intonations that it would have been impossible not to understand what she was saying. He heard the edge of his ear as the old woman went somewhere, then swore in the kitchen because the prices had generally gone crazy, then quietly tinkled dishes, something cooking. And then there was such a smell from the kitchen that Mason almost choked on his saliva. He couldn't sit in the room for long and went out. Miranda was sitting in front of the old TV, watching the show intently. It seemed to Mason that they had started showing this movie when he was still young. Miranda turned around. Mason, dinner will be ready in 15 minutes. Good. He sat down on the couch and looked at the screen too. The TV kept blinking. Mason, not that he didn't understand what the episode was about. His eyes even hurt. Miranda, how do you watch it? It hurts your eyes. There's no other way. I've tried listening, but it's not that interesting. And he doesn't always blink. Sometimes he blinks normally. It was as if she was sticking up for the TV. The credits were already rolling. But that's it. Let's go eat. Mason. The smells coming from the kitchen were such that Mason could hardly keep up with Miranda. As soon as they entered the kitchen, the big alarm clock rang. Miranda slammed it down. I remember. At the surprised look, Mason explained. If I put something in the oven, I always set the alarm. I don't think I've ever forgotten, but age. She said the age thing so lightly that it made Mason's heart ache. Miranda made meat with mushrooms, bell peppers, and potatoes. Mason had been to a lot of restaurants, but he'd never tasted anything this good. He leaned back on the back of the kitchen couch and said, I'd never eaten anything like this. Miranda laughed. It's still a flower. When you taste my granddaughter's cooking, you'll die. Poisoned? She looked at him in surprise, then laughed. But if she does, it's delicious. Mason laughed and thought it would be interesting to see this granddaughter, who is so independent and cooks so deliciously. Such an opportunity presented itself to him in a couple of days. Only if he knew it was the same granddaughter. Mason was just turning into the yard when he saw the girl. It had been raining since morning, and the puddles were almost knee-deep. Either he saw her too late, or she was deaf and didn't hear him, but he happened to dunk her pretty good from the puddle. The girl jumped back, and he immediately stopped. Though he didn't think he was guilty, he decided to apologize. The girl turned to him, furious enough that the sparks and lightning from her eyes felt almost physical. Mason was not immediately able to speak because he was simply stunned. Excuse me, please, I didn't notice you. The girl took out her headphones. It was immediately clear to him why she hadn't heard him. Excuse me, you're out of your mind. You're racing through a yard where people and children are walking by the way. She thought about it for a while. And cats and dogs. I'm not racing, I was just driving. You saw the puddles. Why are you walking on the very edge? I'm walking on the sidewalk, you know, where I'm supposed to walk. Young lady, why are you yelling like that? I apologized. You want me to reimburse you for the dry cleaning? She even stomped. Make up for your brains. But that was too much. You're a rude girl. I hear from a boor, and from one who can't drive a car." She turned around and walked away, and Mason jumped in the car and accelerated. It happened, and this time he didn't want to. There was another puddle in front of him, and the girl was just passing in front of it. He even clenched his eyes for a second, seeing a wave of dirty water flying toward the girl, and in the rearview mirror, he could see her threatening him with her fist. Mason could barely find a place to park his car. It felt like everyone remembered they had cars in the rain. Mason's car was bulky, so he had to work hard to fit it neatly into the empty space. When he finally put the car in, the rain was already over. Somewhere in the direction of the sunset, the sun was peeking out. His mood improved a little. "What's the big deal?" she yelled at her husband at home. Mason thought all this, and before his eyes stood those eyes that threw sparks. He smiled a little. Yes, it would not be boring at home with such a one. He quickly walked up the steps and opened the door. Miranda immediately gave him the keys. "You're young. You're not likely to be back late, so I can't have an old woman running around to open the door for you." Someone was talking in the kitchen. He looked in to say hello and was stunned. Those very eyes were looking at him. So Grandma, and now this boorish monster is standing in his kitchen, looking at me like he's seen a ghost. "Don't tell me that's your tenant." Miranda turned around in surprise, looked at Mason, and suddenly laughed. "I was wondering how I could introduce you to, and you know you already have." The girl jumped up. "Grandma, it's not funny. I was just telling you that he poured me out of a puddle and then yelled at me." "Easy, Kathy. I don't believe he did it on purpose. I haven't known Mason that long, but he seemed decent to me. So, Kathy, we know how hot-tempered you are. Why don't you go to the bathroom and change out of those tattered, God-forsaken clothes and put them in the machine so you can wear normal clothes?" Granny looked reproachfully at Kathy's torn jeans. Mason tried to hide a chuckle. It was a good thing he had only brought decent clothes, in Miranda's opinion. As Kathy walked past Mason, he gave her a subtle tongue lashing that made her flare her nostrils, and then with a quick glance at Miranda, she made a fist at him. "I can see everything." The grandmother looked at Kathy over her glasses. The girl snorted angrily and disappeared into the bathroom. Mason tried to put a serious expression on his face. He didn't want Miranda to think he was as unserious as Kathy. Don't take offense to her. Kathy is very nice, except for her temper. She's like a match. She's like that about everything. You know, when she was 15 years old, she was hit by a car, and it was because a boy had a ball out of his hand, you know, an ordinary ball. It rolled on the road, and the kid cried. This crazy woman rushed after the ball, saved the ball, even gave it to the kid, and then passed out. A month in the hospital, and all because of doing first and thinking later. Mason realized that it really wasn't a very smart thing to do, but Miranda's words made him respect the girl. Apparently, the incident hadn't changed her either. Kathy remained just as fiery and impetuous or spunky. It didn't matter. What mattered was that the girl was alive, real. When she came out of the bathroom, Miranda was in the room. Kathy had already gone into the kitchen, only then seeing that Granny was gone, but she couldn't back out, and Mason realized it right away. She plopped down on the couch across from him. A minute, two. Well, now it's time. Kathy, let's make up. I'm not as bad as you think I am. Really, I didn't mean to spill it on you. I'm sorry. She looked at him in surprise, then snorted. Well, then I'm sorry too. It's my own fault. These headphones always let me down. Mason held out his little finger to her. Make up. Make up. Kathy laughed and put hers out. And don't fight again. Miranda had long since gone to bed, and Kathy and Mason were still sitting in the kitchen. So now you're going to go to all sorts of cafes and try what they're cooking. Oh, yeah, that's great. What a job. Mason looked at her seriously. Kathy, why don't you help me out a little? She looked at him in surprise. How? Well, look, if I'm alone, I'll be suspected quickly. But if I have a lady with me, everyone will just think, if they notice us walking around, that I'm just trying to impress you. Do you want me to walk with you? Kathy opened her eyes wide and looked like a naive child. Exactly, but if you have that much time for me, of course. But it's expensive. You needn't worry about that at all. Think of it as the firm taking care of all the expenses. Kathy didn't resist for long. In fact, all she could manage was a moment's pause. Yes, I agree. Just a little longer, and she was sure to clap her hands. Mason smiled. And what's up with your evening gown? Excuse me. I'd like to start with a restaurant. Kathy blushed. Actually, I'm not a beggar. Of course you are. Mason looked embarrassed. That's not what I meant at all. It's just that you're young. You're hardly interested in a restaurant, and in a cafe and clothes are quite different. Why buy an evening gown if you don't need it? He got a little confused while he was explaining, but Kathy understood him. It's all right. I went to a friend's wedding not too long ago, so I had to buy one. To Mason's surprise, Kathy had excellent manners, though he chided himself for thinking that way. She wouldn't be laughing loudly or doing anything worse while in a decent restaurant. Still, he watched in amazement at her transformation at the way she deftly handled the entire set of table items. When they entered the restaurant, Mason immediately noticed the almost complete absence of guests. It was strange. Everything seemed decent, but the shortcomings began to rush in as soon as they sat down at the table. Mason noticed that the tablecloth, beautiful from afar, was covered in stains, not fresh ones of course, old laundered ones, but very much peppering its appearance. This told that things were not going well for the host. On the other hand, the host could have just been greedy or didn't know how to run a business. The waiter had to wait for more than 10 minutes, even though the room was almost empty. When they began to make an order, it turned out that more than half of the written in the menu is not there at all. Tell me, then why is it offered? The waiter, with a bored look, shrugged his shoulders. Kathy smiled. Tell us what you have so we don't waste your valuable time. The waiter perked up a little. Judging by the constantly vibrating phone in his pocket, time really was precious to him. He quickly listed the poorly chosen menu and they ordered. Yeah, it's kind of sad here. Kathy smiled again. You've never been anywhere else. Believe me, this is almost the most decent restaurant in town. When the order came, Mason realized that the cow that had made the chop had obviously died a death of its own, and with a lot of great-grandchildren. He pushed his plate away and watched Kathy eat. She noticed his gaze and said embarrassedly, I didn't have time to eat today. I came straight here after work. Where do you work? She waved her hand. Over there, we sewed tracksuits. Mason couldn't help himself and asked, Did you study neckwear? Kathy laughed. No. I always wanted to be a chef, a real one, so everyone would know me and I'd surprise everyone. But I graduated as an accountant, and now I work in a tailoring shop. That's quite a list you've got there. Why don't you work as an accountant? Did you try to get a job right after school? Nobody wants an accountant who's just out of school. Everyone wants sharks who are 90 to 60, 90, and 20 years old, with at least 20 years of experience. Mason laughed. Are you kidding? Not at all. To be honest, there's not a lot of work in this town. I've already realized that. I don't think we should torture our teeth. I think that's enough. If anyone cooks good food in this town, it's your grandmother. That's a good point. Grandma always cooked like that. I even had to move back to my parents' apartment because I'd be round in a second. You? I'll never believe it. You'll have to. I'll show you the pictures later. The same waiter came up to them, bringing a rather impressive bill. Kathy wanted to be indignant. Mason saw it in her eyes. He quickly squeezed her hand, and she quieted down. Young man, tell me, is the host in place? The waiter sighed, apparently thinking they were going to complain about him. He's here. What do you want? What if I'm 5 minutes late? Do you want me to complain? Mason smiled. Yeah, zero discipline. No, young man, just give him a note from me. Mason wrote a few words on a piece of paper torn from his notebook. He didn't even bother to fold it. He knew the waiter would read it. The waiter didn't bother to be ceremonious. He ran his eyes over the paper, his eyebrows raised. He nodded and disappeared. They went outside. Shall we go for a walk? Kathy shrugged her shoulders. Let's. The weather's nice. They wandered so long that Mason's legs were tired, talking about nothing, but they were so interested. It turned out that Kathy lived only 3 houses down from Grandma. When they stopped in the driveway, Mason stared at the girl for a while, then abruptly pulled her to him and kissed her. Kathy didn't even try to pull away. He walked home thinking that this was the first time this had ever happened to him. He kissed a girl he was madly attracted to and didn't stay the night with her. Mason, this is not like you at all. He said this to himself and walked into the entryway. Hey, are you trying to buy a restaurant? Mason bounced against the wall. Don't worry, I won't hurt you. In front of him stood a man, tattooed and a gloomy look gave him the appearance of a jailer. What do you want? I'm the boss. I want to talk to you. You've got a lot of nerve. There's a day for that kind of talk. Yes, but I wanted to see you. Come tomorrow after 12 o'clock. We'll discuss it. Okay, I'll be there. The man left the entrance, and Mason thought that it was a mistake to refuse the security that his father offered him. He'd have to call in the morning because it looked like a deal. The next day, just as Mason thought, he bought the restaurant. And he bought it much cheaper than he had expected. The owner was rubbing his hands together. You know, I don't know anything about this. I just got out of prison, and here I am, an inheritance. I never even knew my grandfather. I was only a kid. Then we talked. Then I went to jail, and he went into business, and this happened. I've been here for a year. The restaurant's no longer profitable at all. I owe half the city. Now I'll pay up and go to the sea with a clear conscience. I've never been to the sea. I've been sitting here. Mason saw that the man was happy, as if he had made the most favorable deal of the century, but Mason himself was happy. He didn't have to sit in this town as long as he thought he would. Now it was possible not just to sit around, but to work. Work was something he really wanted to do. He already knew what he wanted to see here. By the way, the place for the base was found this morning too, and quite reasonably priced. Kathy called him in the evening. Are we going out tonight? Sure, but we're not going out. We're going. Where to? You'll find out later. In half an hour on the street, in front of your driveway. Yes, Commander. They drove out of town. Mason was going home the next day because he had to buy equipment, and right now he had to go there. Kathy didn't know about it yet. When he stopped at a small lake that he honestly had just stumbled upon, Kathy looked at him in surprise. Are we having a picnic? Or are we going to be shooting some kind of sample here too? A trial, yes. I'll treat you to my specialty kebab tonight. Kathy clapped her hands. I love kebabs. I love nature. Mason couldn't stand it, kissed her again. They sat on the shore, drinking wine, laughing. Suddenly Kathy became serious. Mason, how are you going to drive? You've been drinking. He looked at her in surprise. I thought we were going to sleep here. You see, I have to go home tomorrow for a couple weeks, and that means I won't see you for that long. He knew perfectly well he was talking some romantic nonsense for little girls, but Kathy believed him. How are you leaving? Tears came to her eyes. Mason wiped away one tear that wanted to escape under his collar. Just like that, I bought a restaurant here, and now I have to buy everything for it. It's not like it's forever. I'm actually going to live here. Really? That's so true. Kathy reached for him, and Mason picked her up in his arms, stared into her eyes for a moment, then carried her to the car. Mason. Eh? I haven't had anyone yet. Mason shivered with heat. What a twist. He'd never had one of those either. Mason felt his mind clouded. Nothing would stop him now. During the night, they never slept a wink. When he pulled into the driveway, Kathy, she clung to him. You just get some sleep. Don't drive like that. I will. How about you? She smiled. And I've got the day off. I'm going straight to bed. Mason kissed her affectionately. Good night. More like a good morning. He slept only 2 hours. The alarm clock rang. Mason jumped up, stood under the cold shower. Miranda was gone, but there was a note in the kitchen. I'm at the market. I'll be there this afternoon. Good. He wouldn't have to face Kathy's grandmother. He took some bills out of his wallet, put them on the table, and wrote on the note, Thank you, I'm gone. Buy yourself a proper TV. Dad greeted him as if Mason had been gone for years. Son, you look different grown up. Well, Dad, I've been gone less than 2 weeks. Have you grown up in that time? Sure, I left as just a son, just Mason, and came back as a restaurant owner. Come on, everybody, you can tell me and show me. But they didn't get to talk business right away. They were intercepted by Aunt Clara, who's been your father's housekeeper for as long as Mason can remember. Where to? The child is hungry and cold from the road, and you're taking him to work. Christopher tried to be indignant, but then waved his hand. All right, feed your baby, the 2-footer. Mason missed both Aunt Clara and his father. Lisa had come over several times. Mason, who was eating Aunt Clara's specialty borscht, raised an eyebrow. What did she want? She kept asking where you'd gone, even going to your place. Mason snorted. I wonder why. Well, you better know why. There must be reasons. Mason liked Lisa. She was very pretty. She knew how to present herself, and Lisa was a good match for a businessman. A little greedy, well, there are no others nowadays. Or are there? My consciousness obligingly brought up the image of Kathy, but Mason immediately banished it. Sure, Kathy was the most beautiful thing in his life, but it was just entertainment. There was no talk of them being together. Kathy is too simple and naive, so she's going to stay at home and he's going to attend receptions and events alone? Well, of course not. A girl like Lisa, or preferably Lisa herself, should be around for these parties. It took all evening to show his father the pictures, to tell him what he wanted to do. Christopher listened attentively and twirled one picture or the other in his hands. You've done a great job, and most importantly, you bought the restaurant very profitably. Christopher looked at the map. I understand that there is nothing like it nearby. Nothing. But there are plenty of things to look at. Mason looked at the map. What do you mean? Look, there's a game room not too far away. We should do a kids' menu and advertise. We could allow banquets for the first time. After that, it's up to you. Okay. Dad, you're ahead. I didn't even think of that. Of course we need a children's menu. They sat for a while and went to bed. The next day was too full of plans. Lisa caught him at lunchtime. Hi, where did you disappear to? I've been away. We're opening a branch. Oh, that's good. Why didn't you call? Maybe I could have come with you. Lisa grinned with the edge of her pouty lips. Mason smiled. Would you have gone? With you? To the ends of the earth. Would you? Sure. Well, then be ready in 2 weeks. Mason left and Lisa grabbed her phone. She had to tell all her friends that Mason had practically proposed to her. Leaving in 2 weeks didn't work, not even 3 months later. The night before he left, my dad had a stroke. He was walking to the house, came home early from work because he wasn't feeling well, and collapsed right on the walkway. Aunt Clara saw him immediately, called an ambulance, and did not touch him. Only her quick actions helped to get rid of him with little blood. Lisa had to be patient. When Christopher was fully recovered, Mason began to pack again. Lisa decided it was finally her time. She was ready before Mason was. To be honest, Lisa was boring him, but he didn't say anything. As a companion, she was perfect. While still at home, Mason found a nice cottage, which he intended to buy at once. But Lisa said nothing about it. Just before he left, he had an argument with his father. The argument was quite loud, and Lisa must have heard it, so she thought they were arguing. It's true that Lisa arrived later. Or rather, she came to visit. By the way, they had a very good time then. Then she left, unable to stand the boredom Mason. It was even worth arranging this state of affairs. He got a girlfriend, beautiful, fashionable, and that's all. The rest of the time he could work quietly. But then Lisa arrived with his things. He couldn't tell her he didn't want to. She came, let her live. Lisa had instantly turned his house into some kind of brightly colored rag storehouse. For some reason, no housekeeper got along with her, so the house was a mess. Mason tried to spend as much time as possible at work, but even there she annoyed him. He had to make a condition that if Lisa showed up unannounced at his place of work, he would simply take away her money. Lisa took offense, didn't talk to him for 2 weeks, but as soon as she needed something, she found a way to make up with him. She always had the same way, which Mason, a young man full of strength, could not resist. Today was fine. Hell knows how she even found out. Although why should she be surprised? He bought gifts for the orphanage every year. She knew that. She'd never tried to tell him what to do before, but now she was going off on him. Mason was about to leave the office when the phone rang in his pocket. Jesus, how many times can you do this? He grabbed the phone, but it was his father. Yeah, Dad. Mason, what's wrong? The young man sat back in his chair. Nothing. What makes you think something's wrong with me? Well, son, I've known you for years, so come on, tell me. Mason grinned. Dad always knew everything. Tell me, Dad, what do you do if a woman wants to marry, wants to boss you around, wants to be always and everywhere, and you don't want that? It's all right, Lisa. What did you want, son? It's your own fault. How long have you been together? Years, and you never married her. But I wasn't going to. You should have told her that, Dad. Mason, you're not 15 anymore. You need to take responsibility for your actions. Lisa's understandable. Time's running out, and you're not doing anything. Either get married or, frankly, I don't know what's going to happen. You realize there'll be a terrible scandal. I know, Dad, but now I realize I don't want to see her anymore. It's up to you. As far as I know, you don't have anyone else besides Lisa? No, I never really thought about it. You still don't want to? No, Dad. I definitely don't, and today I made sure of it. Yeah, I guess I'm not gonna have any grandchildren. Mason laughed. So you're only thinking about yourself. Not about your son, but about yourself. Well, you can take it that way. Dad, why are you calling? Not to talk about Lisa? No, of course not. Mason, you're going to the kid's birthday party tomorrow, right? Yeah. Did you forget the date? No, I just suddenly wanted to come too. Mason, you're up. You know I'd love to come. Can I ask you a question? Go ahead. Why haven't you come here once since I moved here? Is it because of Jenna? I could hear my dad sniffling on the other end of the phone. Well, you could say that. I made a big mistake once. I really liked her, and she liked me for that matter. I asked her to be my mistress. She promised me she'd have all the luxuries if she came away with me. She asked me again, mistress? And I, like a fool, confirmed it. Mason was a little taken aback by his father's confession. Are you serious? She what? She slapped me in the face and sent me away. She told me never to get in her way, and I took offense. What do you mean, I was rejected? Well, it's been years I'm old, and I can't get over her. Yes, Dad, we don't know who's more stupid. Christopher laughed. That's where you're right. So are you expecting me tomorrow? Yeah, I am. I'm gonna take care of some business today. Mason was on his way home. He was never home at this time, but tonight he wanted to finish things with Lisa. He knew there would be a lot of yelling, that Lisa wouldn't just leave, so he was even prepared to offer a payoff. The house was quiet. He was already thinking he'd come for nothing. And is Lisa hanging out with her girlfriend somewhere? But he heard her voice. She was talking in the bedroom, apparently on the phone. Mason headed that way. Kitty, why are you sulking? I can't do anything. It's just a sheep's ass, that's all. What am I supposed to tell him to marry me because I'm pregnant? What if he realizes it's not true before he puts a ring on my finger? Mason froze. Wow, she's being so frank with someone? What girlfriend? But at that moment, a man's voice was distinctly heard in the bedroom. Lisa, you've been feeding me promises for a year. Do you really think I'll keep waiting? I have enough better offers. Mason pushed the door open. Am I interrupting? Lisa squealed and pulled the blanket over herself. The man, a pumped-up, dark-haired, handsome man, began to dress quickly. Well, no, I didn't sign up for this. Do I have to? He walked quickly past Mason, who didn't even make an attempt to stop him. What's up, Lisa? It's your fault you got it. I'm not arguing. I'm just asking if you need help packing. Or can you do it yourself? And I'm not going anywhere. Then you're out in disgrace. Have you forgotten that we have cameras? And I've never watched them before, but I can now. You bitch, you bastard. Lisa was grabbing things, throwing them into suitcases. Mason was watching her with a smile. How could you think he'd put a camera in the bedroom? Lisa. 2 hours later, screaming and swearing her last words, Lisa finally got into a cab. Mason sighed. This feels so good. We should go to the orphanage, see how the preparations were going. He got into the car. It felt so good to be free. I wonder who that man was. No, not at all. Mason pulled up to the gate. It looked like the kids weren't back yet, but Jenna was definitely there. He knew she always supervised the setting up of the Christmas tree herself, then helped dress it up. He walked down the driveway, stopping to pet the big shaggy dog, which, by the way, was the dog's name. The kids found him very small under the fence, took him out, fed him, hid him from the caretakers until he couldn't fit under the beds anymore. Jenna almost had a heart attack when she saw the big guy. She immediately called the shelter, and then him. Mason arrived, and all the kids came crying to him. Uncle Mason, talk to Jenna. Tell her not to take our buddy Rex and 1,000 other nicknames. Quiet. What's the dog's name anyway? We all have different names. Right. It's just a dog. How did you manage to hide him for so long? Doesn't he bark or growl? No, he doesn't bark, never. Jenna told me right away. There, I'm telling you, he's some kind of sicko. I'll fire the whole damn lot of you. He's not sick. The younger ones were already openly sobbing, and Mason had to take the dog to the vet. The dog was healthy, well fed. But why wouldn't he bark? Because he doesn't need to bark. He's doing fine. Altogether, they persuaded Jenna not to throw out the dog, not to give it to the shelter, so it took root, though more on the street, and slept in the old lady. He was fed by everyone who couldn't be bothered. That's why he looked more like a little bear. Mason finally made it to the door. He had to tell Jenna tactfully that her father was coming tomorrow, but that it wouldn't be a surprise to her. She had a stroke a few years ago when she found out Christopher had a stroke. Almost freaked out. Mason regretted 100 times that he'd even told her. There was no one in the hallway, but there were voices coming from the auditorium. He headed that way. Jenna and her co-workers were decorating the tree. Hello, everyone. The girls said hello and continued working. Jenna gave him a startled look. Mason, weren't you supposed to be here tomorrow? Well, I decided to come today. She didn't have time to finish. Mason was attracted by the lower branches of the tree. There was definitely someone hiding there. Hey, get out! Mason squatted down and the branches of the tree slid open. A boy, about 3, maybe 4 years old, stepped boldly out of there. He looked at Mason as if he had just committed the world's worst crime, and Mason felt about that. 1,000 thoughts were running through his head. The most sensible one kept repeating itself. I don't get it. Am I dreaming? Or is this some kind of joke? The boy stopped in front of him and looked at him with a displeased look. His eyes, absolutely the same as Mason's, looked at him without blinking. Mason had no way of knowing what to say. The child was a smaller copy of Mason, and the fact that they were bound to have something in common was understandable. Just now, Mason didn't understand at all. This boy can't be related to him. Papa must know something. Though before Papa, there must be something Jenna could explain to him. There was a reason she was standing there so frightened. Mason scratched his nose with the back of his palm. For years he'd tried to eradicate the habit, but still, when he was nervous, he could rub his nose so hard that it turned red. And the boy, almost synchronously with him, reached up and scratched his nose in the same way Mason had done. The man turned to Jenna. Jenna, who is this boy? Is this your pupil, the reject? She looked at him confused. Why do you ask? Jenna, since you are now trying to avoid answering, it becomes clear to me that you understand both why I am asking and what is going on and where the legs are growing from. Tell me also that you don't notice our similarities. Jenna stared at the boy, then at Mason. Do I? Can't I see it? Oh, you don't see it. Maybe it's just my eyesight. Shouldn't I call someone else to take a look? Mason didn't know why he was getting so angry. Jenna had nothing to do with it, but she probably knew where the boy was from. And if the kid really didn't have anything to do with him, the principal wouldn't be so freaked out. The boy stepped towards Mason and held out the candy. Don't yell. Mason took the candy confusedly. Thank you. I'm not screaming and I won't. He turned back to Jenna again. A stray thought flashed through his mind. Maybe Dad and Jenna. But no, They're not the same age. Jenna, where did that boy come from? You see how much he and I look alike. It's obvious to a fool that we're not strangers, but what could connect us? Or rather, who? If the boy has been abandoned, I'll raise everyone to find out. The boy has not been abandoned, and he has nothing to do with you. Mason froze, a voice he recognized immediately. How many times he'd been tempted to call, or at least text to apologize, but then decided he hadn't promised anyone anything. On the other hand, Kathy hadn't called him once, and she could have. Now he stood there, aware of Kathy standing behind him and afraid to turn around. A puzzle instantly formed in his head. A boy who looked like him, Kathy, who he had played with and taken off. It didn't take much thinking to figure it out. The only thing I don't know is, what now? From the sound of Kathy's voice, nothing good serves him right. Mason followed the boy around him and came up to Kathy. Mommy. Kathy scooped him up in her arms and pulled him against her. He finally met her eyes. Hello, Kathy. Hello, Mason. She turned and walked toward the exit, and Mason stood there like a complete idiot. What could he do? Run after her and say, "Oh, that's my son." He imagines she's gonna answer him. What a fool he is. Nearby sighed Jenna. Come, Mason, to my room. I'll make you some tea. He obediently followed her. There was real absorbent cotton in his head. The woman made the tea, put a mug in front of him, sat down, looked at him, and started talking. I don't even know. All this time we've all blamed you for doing that to Kathy and Kevin. And now I look at you and I realize I feel sorry for you too. His name is Kevin? Yes, Kathy named him after her grandfather. Why didn't she tell me? I didn't know. It could have been completely different. The principal sighed. What's that, Mason? Would you have married Kathy because you had a baby and you'd both be in pain for the rest of your lives, or would you have taken Kevin away from her? Oh, come on. That's ridiculous. Why would I take the baby away from its mother? Well, the thing is, Kathy came to your house. She was so desperate. Kevin was very ill at the time. Her grandmother had gone quite ill. The girl was just torn. She was so short of money. The treatment Kevin received was so much that even with our help, she would not have been able to afford it. Miranda signed over the apartment to her, told her to sell it. They just had time to sell it and move Kathy in before the grandmother was gone. Kathy was a good girl. She hung in there. Went to D.C., spent almost 6 months there, got Kevin back on his feet. Wait, she didn't come to see me. Do you really think I'd say no to help? There was a woman, a girl. Apparently she realized it all at once and told Kathy that if she ever saw her again, she would do anything to have her baby taken away from her. Lisa. Mason clutched his head. He sat like that for a while, then looked up at Jenna with completely pained eyes. What am I supposed to do now? I don't know, Mason. I'm not much of a counselor in these matters, but of course you have to do something. I can see how worried you are. Why is my son worried? His father's cheerful voice came out of nowhere. Mason raised his head, and the smile slid off Christopher's face. Son, what's wrong? Mason didn't even know how to say it. Dad, I have a son and you have a grandson. Christopher sank quietly into the chair. How's that? Jenna jumped up and held out a glass of water to Christopher. He took the glass from her hands, held her gaze a little longer than necessary. Thank you. The woman looked embarrassed and sat back down. Mason began to tell without much detail, but in a way that made it clear what a creep he was, the son of the unexpected. What do you think you're going to do? I don't know. Dad, of course we have to do something. Only I'm afraid Kathy won't even let me on the doorstep. Christopher took a good look at him, and he's right. You know, son, I didn't think I'd ever say this, but don't make my mistakes. A long time ago, I could have been happy and made another person happy, but convention rules in our lives. We have lost so many years, almost a lifetime, but now I know for sure that I am not leaving here without Jenna. And even if we don't have as much time left as we'd like, it's better than nothing. You've already deprived yourself of your son for so long, and now you have to make up for it. Don't lie to Kathy. She's been through enough because of you. You don't like her? Just say so. Don't try to marry her without love. I think if you're honest with her, she won't mind you hanging out with Kevin. Mason jumped up. Dad, you're right about everything. Thank you. He jumped out of the office. Christopher looked up at Jenna. Hello, Jenna. Hello, Christopher. All right, Jenna, whatever you want. I'm not leaving without you. It will probably be hard for you to forgive me for those stupid words, for that sentence, but I'll try. Jenna stubbornly pressed her lips together, then relaxed. Christopher, I was so sorry I turned you down then. I didn't need your money, but I needed you. It was so hard without you, I couldn't bear it. I cursed myself with the last words that I did not go with you. I would have been with you. Christopher lowered his head. I guess stupidity is our hallmark, Mason's and mine. Jenna smiled. Don't worry about it. I'm sure they'll be able to talk. And you know, I don't know about Mason, but Kathy still loves him. Why didn't Jenna say something to me? I would have solved all of Kathy and my grandson's problems. Kathy wouldn't accept your help. She's a little different. Mason raced through town. He remembered exactly where Kathy lived, but he didn't know what he would say to her. On the way, he saw a toy store and slammed on the brakes. He flew into the store in such a way that he frightened a young girl saleswoman. Girl, for a boy 3, 4 years old, what exactly are you interested in? Everything. Bring anything that's good. Mason put the car in a vacant lot, but he was in no hurry to get out. He was just afraid. After sitting for 10 minutes, he got out. He's a man, so he must be brave. Mason pressed the bell for a long time. Finally, the door opened. You? Me. He pushed Kathy aside and walked into the apartment. Kevin came out to meet him. He stared in surprise at the mountain of boxes in Mason's hands. The man knelt down in front of the boy. Hey, I brought you this. For me? Yeah, for you. The boy gingerly touched one box and then looked at Kathy. She had tears in her eyes. How much had she dreamed of seeing her son like this, next to Mason? No, not crying. Mom. Kevin looked questioningly at his mother, and she smiled and nodded. The boy sighed so happily that Mason couldn't contain his smile. 5 minutes later, they were eagerly unsealing boxes, pulling cars, robots out of there. Each new toy was accompanied by a new exclamation. Not only Kevin was squealing with joy, but Mason as well. Kathy sat down on the couch. She didn't want to smile, but looking at Mason, who was crawling on his knees and driving some tractor on the carpet, making strange noises, it was impossible not to smile. Kevin, on the other hand, had chosen the biggest car he could find, and was no quieter than Mason. When they had another accident, Kathy resolutely stood up. That's it, you woeful drivers. Wash your hands and come to the table for dinner. Come on, Mom. Kevin was about to fold his lips, but Mason gave him a gentle shove. What are you doing? Everyone at every job has lunch, especially drivers. The boy looked at him in surprise. You too? Me too. In fact, if you eat it all, I'll let you drive a real car. Kevin's eyes widened as they raced to the bathtub to wash their hands. There was silence at lunch. Only Kevin talked nonstop. Mason learned that Ethan wouldn't brag about his car anymore because Kevin had better cars. Toward the end of lunch, Kevin began to peck his nose. Kathy got up, picked him up, and walked out. Mason heard Kevin muttering, "I'm not going to sleep." Kathy smiled and replied, "Well, of course you won't." About 10 minutes later, Mason cautiously made his way into the room. Kevin was sound asleep, hugging his big machine, and Kathy sat staring at one point. Finally, as if awake, she got up, walked past him into the kitchen, Mason following her. "Kathy, I don't know how to find the words. I realize they're all useless, and I'm unforgivable." Kathy was silent, and he came over. "Kathy, say something. You realize I'm not a step away from you now." She turned slowly, looked him in the eyes, was silent for a while, then said, "Are you sure you want all this?" "Of course I'm sure. I've never been so sure in my life as I am now." "Kathy, I realize that I've missed all the deadlines, that I've blown everything I can, but will you let me make it up to you? I'm not forbidding you. You can talk to Kevin whenever you want. That's not enough for me." She raised her eyebrows in surprise and then asked in a frightened way, "What do you want? Do you want to take him away?" "No, what do you mean?" "I want us to have a normal family. You know, a real family." Kathy moved away from him. "If it's for Kevin, then don't. No, now, Kevin has nothing to do with it." She tried to move further away from him, but Mason pulled her against him. When he started kissing Kathy, it was somehow peaceful, somehow easy. That's what happens when you go back to a place you've wanted to go for a long time. They were interrupted by a phone call. Mason really didn't want to pull away from Kathy, but he pulled out the phone. It was Dad. "Mason, where are you?" "Dad, I'm at Kathy's with Kevin." "That's good. Is she around?" "Yeah. Put it on speaker." Mason was surprised but complied with his father's request. "Kathy, I want to apologize to you. For me and for my little brat. I'm sorry you forgive him. Don't waste time. I really want to be a grandfather." Kathy smiled faintly, and Christopher continued, "I'm calling you guys on business. Jenna and I just applied for a job. If you hurry, we'll be able to have the wedding on the same day." My father disconnected, and Kathy looked at Mason strangely. He, on the other hand, was looking at her. "Kathy, I'll tell you later all those words I should have been saying all along. I know you know how to make quick decisions. Please marry me. I'll make sure you never regret your decision. Anything to make Kevin forget forever that he ever didn't have a daddy." Kathy didn't think long. "I agree." Mason grabbed her in his arms, spun her around, and then grabbed the phone. "Daddy, please hold the place for us. Kevin will wake up and we'll be there." "I'm awake." Mason turned around, and there was a sleepy Kevin standing in the doorway, holding the same car. Mason smiled. "Dad, we'll be right there. My son woke up." It was the first time he'd ever said the words so freely, and Kevin looked at him seriously. "Are you my dad?" "Yes, Kevin. Where have you been?" Mason looked at Kathy confused, but she was already seated in front of his son. "Daddy's been working, and now he's back. Isn't he going away again?" Mason shook his head negatively. "Never." The boy thought for a moment. "Can I tell Ethan that I have a daddy too?" "Of course you can. You and I will tell Ethan together." Mason hugged his son's little body. What an unusual feeling. It makes you want to cry. The next day they were all at the orphanage. The children were still eating breakfast, and Mason, Kathy, and Christopher were arranging the presents. Mason was doing everything with one hand, and Kathy's palm was firmly clasped in his other hand. Christopher was smiling. He could see everything perfectly. Yesterday had been a wonderful day. He felt as if he had lost 20 years at once, no less. The door swung open. Christopher had barely had time to play a children's New Year's song, and the room was filled with children. They didn't rush to the tree, didn't grab the presents, just stood back and looked at everything with admiration. Kathy decided to take the lead. Then Mason joined her as well. They handed out gifts, pink bags, boxes to the girls, blue to the boys. When everyone had their presents, including Kevin, of course, Mason turned to Kathy. "I have a present for you, too." He pulled a small box out of his pocket. "Here, I'm sorry. I didn't get it yesterday because I didn't know if you'd send me away or not. I didn't think I'd be so happy today. Here, can I wear this?" Kathy held out her hand, and Mason took out a beautiful ring. Then he pressed Kathy's hand to his lips. They didn't see that Jenna and Christopher were standing nearby. They stood with their arms around each other and looked at them. "Daddy, help!" Mason looked at Kevin in surprise. He was even confused when he realized that Daddy was him. Mason smiled and sat down. "Of course, son. What's wrong? This town has never seen such a wedding in its entire existence." Of course, the wedding was at the Mason restaurant, which, by the way, has long been the most popular in town. There were so many guests that all the hotels were occupied, and the sellers of flower stores looked in horror at the empty shelves. We decided to sign in the restaurant, or rather, on the platform in front of it. At the door stood 3 men, 2 adults, and 1 small. 3 generations of men who would be happy today. All were wearing black tuxedos, including Kevin. He proudly held Daddy's hand, thought for a moment, and took Grandpa's hand too. "Dad, don't you think they should be here by now? It seems like we should have insisted that they all come together." "Yeah," Kevin said importantly. "Mom is never late." Mason smiled, and Christopher laughed. "Well, Mason, that means your Kathy will bring my Jenna on time." A white, long limousine was turning into the parking lot. Kevin gasped. "Wow, what a long car." They walked toward it. The car came to a stop. Mason opened the door and put his hand in Kathy's. She looked at it carefully and put her hand in his. Then Jenna appeared as well. Kevin gave them a serious look. "You are beautiful tonight, but I'm better." Everyone laughed, and Christopher said, "And we don't even doubt it." Kevin took Kathy and Jenna's hands and lent them to where the guests were waiting for them, where they were to become husband and wife. Weddings are fun, but the sooner it's over, the sooner he can get back to his cars.
Subscribe and click the bell.
It was a month before her husband's birthday. Maria realized that her mother-in-law was planning a big celebration, but she didn't want to be a part of it. Robert, Maria's husband, was the owner and director of the local mill. In one person in a small provincial town, it all already looked like big business. The mill was in demand by the local people. Many people tried to keep livestock and poultry, which were then taken away from them by suppliers. Maria had been living with her husband for 10 years, but in recent years she had increasingly begun to question her choice. Once a young girl from the village, she wanted to marry a city dweller in the hope of leaving her godforsaken village. But the years went by, and Maria began to realize that family life with Robert, she had not succeeded. And it was not that she and her husband still had no children, but the man was never distinguished by a special devotion. After a year, Maria realized her husband was having an affair. So what? Thought the 25-year-old then. He married me anyway, and he comes home to me. But years passed, and Maria realized that her attitude to family life was fundamentally flawed. Maybe that's why we don't have children, Maria sighed. If he loved and appreciated me, he would not have any women on the side. What kind of life is that? My husband almost every day comes home from work, and with packs of lipstick, or from him women's perfume smells. Maria, in the last 3 years, began to think about what would happen if she and her husband divorced. It was a question that kept her on her toes. Maybe I'd meet someone who would love me, she thought, and what I have can really be called a marriage. Everything in our family is defective, starting with a phrase like you, and ending with the desire to cook dinner for her husband. Maria closed her eyes before her. Fragments from her childhood flashed through her mind. Her father, who drank a few drinks at dinner every night. Maria's mother, who worked for the participants and came home from work with no energy. Her legs were beginning to fail. The woman saw 3 cows, in whose yard her mother used to give milk before work and pouring it into jars, which the neighbor took away and took to the city to sell. And that, of course, was not life, sighed the woman. And anyway, why did we need so much? She thought. After all, it was possible for mother and father to leave their participant and to deal with cattle and poultry at home. They all hoped that they would retire and be given a lot of money. In fact, it turned out that despite the long service, both the father and the mother were given the minimum wage. How many daughter ran with them to all kinds of instances? But they couldn't do anything. In the end, Greg, Maria's older brother, who stayed in the village, looked after the parents. For the first few years, Maria came often. But 3 years ago, she went out to work, so now she didn't have as much free time. I'd better go to work, Maria said to herself then. I'm fed up with my mother-in-law and her reproaches. Soon she will start counting every piece of bread I put in my mouth. Maria looked at her watch, but there were 20 minutes left till the end of the break. She got a job as a cashier at a public utility. The pay, of course, was small. But Maria felt independent from her husband. The only friend, and she had Lucy, with whom the girl met by chance. Maria then had just arrived in the city. She had no housing. She found an ad in the newspaper that a room was rented. The landlady was a very nice woman named Lucy. She was 15 years older than Maria. But after Maria's marriage, the women continued to be friends. Hi, Maria. The friend was happy. I haven't heard from you for a long time. How are you doing? Hi, Lucy. Maria replied cheerfully. It's nothing new. I'm just preparing myself for my next challenge. Robert's birthday is in a month, so his mother's having a birthday party. At least we'll have fun, Maria. You've got to take it easy. Lucy, to tell you the truth, I'm sick of him and his mom. You were swearing, Maria. I don't even know why I live with him. He doesn't love me. I don't love him either. He's got tons of women on the side. And I've been telling you for a long time to leave him, and don't even think about it. Seriously, answered Lucy. Men like him never settle down. You know, I do not understand why he needs me. Gardens in the voice at Maria. Already would have filed for divorce, and each of us would have long lived their own lives. How many times we argued with him about it, and he still does not. And a week later he comes again, all in lipstick. What kind of life is that? You know, such men keep good wives as an excuse to clear their conscience, replied her friend. Here they say, look, she lives with me. After all, everyone knows that Maria is a good model wife, so I am good. So I do everything right. You see, you're like a protective shield for him. A good woman can't live with a bad man. That's why he needs you. I don't know. There's a lump in my throat. I'm so sick of all this. Why am I so weak? Free. As soon as I'm about to file for divorce, something inside me stops me. You just look at the results, Lucy said. What have you accomplished in 10 years? Nothing. As the great Einstein said, if you do the same thing for years and expect a different result, you're crazy. And he's right. Maria answered quickly, this is just kind of crazy. And I want it to stop. When Maria started renting a room from Lucy, Lucy was going through a very difficult time in her life. Lucy was recently divorced and had been just coming to terms for a few years. Lucy's first husband was a man of glory and arrogance. He devalued his wife for years and made her bow down to him. When Lucy found herself in a deep depression, it began to dawn on her who was the real reason for her unwillingness to live. Her husband so suppressed her will that Lucy even considered suicide. And only by making incredible efforts, Lucy was able to break free from the net of her first husband and freed herself from the psychological rapist in her life. 2 years after Maria got married, Lucy met her soulmate. Kolya, too, turned out to be a man with a difficult fate. But in a few years together, they overcame their deepest wounds and began to live, as they say, soul to soul. The friends saw from the outside what was happening to Maria, but she also realized that Maria had to see it all for herself. "Lucy, I really understand that it is necessary to give it all up," Maria finally said. "After his anniversary, I'm going to file for divorce. I don't care if he wants it or not, but I won't cover his dirty ass anymore. Let everyone know what a womanizer he is. I'm done." After talking to her friend, Maria felt a strong inner impulse. She saw very clearly that she needed to end her relationship with Robert. "So I need to do the math," Maria thought as she returned to the cash register after lunch. "For 3 months, I'll try to raise money for the first time. I have enough, and then what God will give." The working day went on in a measured manner. This day there were few visitors, and the cashier was always in her dreams. Maria's eyes were always on some children. She heard their ringing voices, felt the warmth spilling over her whole body. She thought to herself she would like to hold Butuzov in her hands. "God, why I don't have everything like people?" But a visitor came and the cashier was distracted from her thoughts. The man paid the utility bill, thanked me, and left. Finally, the working day came to an end. It was 4:50. Maria slowly began to pack her things. The woman didn't have a car. Yeah, she never really wanted one. Her husband never came home that early. So Maria took public transportation all the time. So the half is about to be a 1. Maria looked at her watch. "In about 50 minutes, I'll be home." She boarded a full bus. Many people were returning home after work. Maria stared out the window. As the bus drove along, hitting a pothole or a bump, the city hadn't allocated money for road work for a long time. Therefore, there had not been much outrage from the passengers for a long time. I still had some chicken breast and some vegetables left, reflected on the way Maria, probably all together and in the heat. And as a side dish, I'll make pasta. Maybe I'll buy something else for tea on the way, she thought. Although Robert had brought a box of chocolates and a cake the other day. His mistress must have run away from him that night. Oh my God. He wasn't ashamed to bring it home. Let him eat it himself. I'll buy myself some chocolate chip cookies. Maria got off one stop early to go to the store. She was curious about what she should get. "Take this brownie." The salesperson offered her one. "It's delicious. It's got everything from buttercream to nuts to chocolate." "All right, give me half a kilo." "I'll try it." Maria agreed. "And you can also have a large leaf green tea." "Well, I'll make myself a festive dinner tonight." Maria was glad, going home. It was still unknown when today Robert would come after this incident with a ruined date. He was angry all night last night. He must have been dumped by another mistress. Maria changed her clothes and got busy preparing dinner. Despite the fact that Robert was making good money, it couldn't be said that he was shocking. At least for the house, they always bought everything cheapest. Maria felt that her husband did not save them for his mistresses. Even judging by the candy he brought, they weren't cheap. But for his wife, the most ordinary caramel would have been fine. Sometimes it got ridiculous. One weekend, Maria asked her husband to buy fruit. Robert went to the market. He was gone most of the day. He finally came back in the evening. "What's this?" Shocked. Took out a bag. "Robert, they're all ruined." But at half price, my husband was quick to respond. "You wanted to make housing out of them anyway. These will do just fine. Are you out of your mind?" Maria got angry. "Maybe I should cook out of slop now." "Robert, don't you have any money?" "Yes," he answered briefly, "but you have to live wisely. If you can save money, why not?" And that wasn't the only time. But even then, in Maria's heart, there was a dream to get rid of her husband forever. Over the years, Robert only got worse. Naturally, this contributed to this, and his mother, Lily, was a woman willful. She brought up her children herself and thought that now everyone should be obliged to her for that. And this applied not only to her children, but also to all the other people who surrounded her. Only her younger brother Eugene never played by her rules. In fact, Robert's mother deliberately withheld that her younger brother at one time helped her very well. In fact, he bought his sister a house, and he himself at that time had nothing behind his soul. One day, Eugene couldn't stand it and told his sister everything. After that, they did not speak for many years. Robert's mother considered him the first enemy of her son and daughter. She always turned Don against him. In general, you could say, has nothing to do with our family. She used to swear. His mother gave birth late, when my father was 20 years old. Who was his father? Nobody knew. She disgraced our whole noble family with that bastard. She was just over 10 years apart from her brother. So when Lucy Lamb's husband died tragically, she was 28 and left with nothing and 2 children in her arms. Eugene took a job in construction that year. He worked for 3 years and gave almost all the money to his sister, which she collected and with which she eventually bought a house. But Robert's mother never talked about it. She had once mentioned that Eugene had a girl he loved at the construction site. She fell from the 7th floor and died. Maria finally prepared dinner and sat down with anticipation at the table. To her surprise, she found that she had no particular appetite. So much time and effort spent on all this eating. I don't want to, Maria sighed and put down the spoon. But I will definitely drink tea, she said to herself, looking at the beautiful cake in the plate. Maria finished her dinner, putting everything away. She knew that it was unlikely that her husband would come home early. Maria took the phone and called her mother, Manya. How are you? Her daughter asked excitedly. How are your legs? Are you feeling better after the medicine? You know, Maria, sometimes it's nothing, and sometimes it just can't walk, sighed the mother. I don't want to keep cattle or poultry. Mom, it's high time you gave it all up. Maria supported her. That you do not have enough money to live? My grandfather and I don't need much, said Wendy. We all want to help you with Greg. Yes, my brother has enough livestock of his own. Maria said angrily. He should start a farm. Maria, but I feel for you. Through tears, said her mother. For your sake, we are walking on the ground. What's the matter? Are we small or what, Mom? The daughter scolded her mother. We've been living our own lives for a long time. Yes, at least Greg has a family and children. What about you? That hurt Wendy's feelings. Maria, how's that? No kids? Mom, but don't start. Maria got angry. But if it doesn't work out, what can I do? I'm doing fine. Robert says he's fine too. Maria, you can, and that's why you have no children, because he is always on mistresses and his mother was worried about him. That's the kind of dog he is. You're right about that, said Maria. Mom, I want to divorce him. I'll file for divorce in a couple of months. It's his anniversary in a month, so my mother-in-law is preparing a party for the city. By the way, are you and Greg coming? I'm sure we're not. I don't think my son is either. They're always busy at home. How can you leave a farm like that? My grandfather and I can't pull it off on our own. Maria, give up this town and come home. After the divorce, where will you go? You don't have a place of your own. And here the whole house is empty. Mom, I don't want to live in the country. You know that, replied her daughter. Of course, I will certainly come to help you, but not to live here. Well, at least after the divorce for a while to come back to your senses, asked Wendy. You're still young. Hurry up and settle things with Robert. Maria, you'll get married and have children. And with them, you see nothing. Only emptiness. After the conversation with her mother, Maria was even more confirmed in her decision to divorce Robert. She realized that when she first met him, she wanted an affluent life more than love. But as she grew older, her selfish desires melted away like smoke. And Maria saw clearly that living for a comfortable and settled life without any interest in each other made no sense. She remembered the day when she met her future husband. The girl was working in a store. One day, a handsome young man walked in. He examined Maria from head to toe. The saleswoman blushed. Do you want something? Finally, she said, I can show you. Unfortunately, what I need is not for sale here, sighed the man. And what is it? Puzzled, asked Maria and began to look around at the goods in the store. Love, romantically said the stranger. It is impossible to buy such a thing. You can, of course, find a girl who will have such a gift, but only where to find her. Looked the visitor directly into the eyes of the girl, turned around and left. What did he want? Perplexed, thought Maria. What did he want? He likes people like him to get on his nerves. The saleswoman quickly forgot about the strange customer, but to her surprise, a few days later he appeared in their store again. Unfortunately, while you were away, love, so did not bring with a serious look, she pronounced. The man at the top of his voice, he laughed loudly. With joyful eyes looked at Maria. The girl became embarrassed and blushed. Do I like you? Said the young man Robert. He extended his hand to the girl. Maria, shyly, shook that hand she shook. You need something else tonight. Yes. Through laughter, he answered. I need a beautiful vase for my mom. Could you pick something out for me? She broke hers the other day and now she's in pain. My mom loves flowers, especially when they are in big vases. Well, take this one. I offered Maria a big vase that was on the floor. It is not only beautiful, but also very spacious. You are probably right. I will take it. The man was pleased. I'll help you pack it. Why did Robert choose her? Maria had never known the man. He was prominent. He could easily have chosen a more suitable mate. But then the girl really believed he was in love with her. 2 months later, Robert had already introduced Maria to his mother. The latter looked at the girl with undisguised disdain. So your parents raise pigs? She looked reproachfully at Maria. Anna, what's indicative of that? No, the girl corrected her. We only have cows and chickens. We don't do pigs. And for me, there is no difference, grudgingly replied Lily. But why else could not understand the behavior of Robert's mother? Maria? They are completely different animals. She smiled. The woman looked at her with contempt. She wanted to say something, but her son intervened. Mom, Maria and I want to get married this summer. He said, Can we get married in a cafe? Isn't it a little early for a wedding? Are you thinking about it? Mother replied dryly. You don't even know her. And judging by the fact that Maria has no education, it's hard to say what she will make of her in the future. And Robert has an education. Maria asked, surprised. As far as I know, he dropped out of the institute and didn't finish it. But at least he studied there for 3 years. Lily looked at her unhappily. It was enough for him to run his own mill. And your 11 grades are only enough to clean the house. After the first meeting with Robert's mother, Maria felt spat upon. The girl at first wanted to prove that she too was capable of something in life. But after a couple of months, rumors reached her. How did Robert get the mill? Was it true or not? But Maria was told that Lily had once been the mistress of the town administrator. For many years, he had paid her for her services, so to speak. Robert's mother derived a very good income from this liaison. First, she got her son into an institute. Then her daughter graduated from technical school and got married. For the wedding, Lily gave her an apartment in the city. And then, out of nowhere, Robert got a mill. Robert, where did you get all that money? People used to ask him. You never worked anywhere for so many years on your mother's neck. As if you didn't work, he answered. I'm not going to go around telling you everything, so it's all earned with sweat and hard work. Once the mill was up and running, even though it was in great demand, Robert used that to his advantage and jacked up the prices right away. Robert had people telling him, you can't do that. If there was something else in town, we go there. And you take advantage of the fact that you're the only one. And you raise your prices like hell. But the mill owner only smiled back. He wasn't going to lower the price for his services. And neither were the common laborers, who gambled on the mills. He didn't pay much for the sacks. It was about 10 o'clock when Maria heard a click in the lock. Her husband showed up on the doorstep. He was glowing with happiness. He smelled strongly of women's perfume. Robert, have you no conscience at all? The wife couldn't bear it. You think I'm going to put up with your partying forever? I'm going to file for divorce. Maria, well, what are you on again? The husband protested. Don't spoil my mood. You're not going anywhere from me. We'll see about that, shouted Maria and went to her room. Can you prepare the papers? She shouted from there. What a fool, Robert replied. Do you think I'll give you anything after the divorce? You've gone to hell. I'm gonna divorce you myself, just as soon as I finish my business with Vanessa. Maria didn't sleep very well at night. She was always angry with her husband and herself. She realized that her patience was coming to an end, and she would not be able to live like this for a long time. In the morning, she woke up early. Her husband was still asleep. Maria quickly dressed and went outside. I don't even want to talk to him anymore, she whispered, so that my eyes don't see him. Maria wandered silently through the morning streets. There was a slight fog. September was just beginning, so the remnants of summer were still in the air. It was Friday, and for Maria, it was the last day of work. The weekend was ahead of her. I'll go to my parents' house, she told herself, and talk to them. Maybe I'll get some ideas about what to do after the divorce. Maria sat down tiredly on a bench, closed her eyes, and put her face in the morning sun. Some children appeared in front of her eyes again. They were laughing loudly, throwing a ball. How funny they are, Maria sighed and came to her senses. I guess I want kids so much inside that it's become my drive. Mom's right, I'm 35 now. Why should I waste my time with this Robert? And there's no love between us. Maria got up from the bench and wandered towards the bus stop. She realized that she would arrive at work too early, but decided it was better to be there than to stay at home. The day flew by very quickly, and Maria was getting home tired. She suddenly picked up the phone and called her husband. Robert, I'm going home today. I'll be back on Sunday, she said dryly. Well, without hiding her joy, her husband answered. When will you be back? Call. He's probably afraid that I'll catch him at home with his mistress. Maria thought to herself and hung up the phone. Robert was very happy that his wife had gone away for a few days and would not be home. His new acquaintance, Vanessa, was driving the man crazy. He'd fallen in love like a boy before his 40th birthday, so I'm going to call Vanessa now so she'll be waiting for me. He picked up the phone and dialed a familiar number. Hello, my favorite. Heard a flirtatious voice in the receiver. Of course I'm waiting for you. I'm just about to cook us a romantic dinner. Vanessa was 22, and she tried with all her might to get a money man. She had come to the city with a very specific purpose, and she did not want to waste her time. Vanessa immediately set herself a target. She had several wealthy men in mind. The girl was not daunted. The fact that they were married. The main thing to catch them in their nets. And then, if she succeeded, she could divorce one of them and marry him. That's good. And if not, I'm not the least bit embarrassed about being a wealthy mistress. Robert was the first to fall for Vanessa. Everything was going well between them, so the girl decided to stop with him for the time being. The main thing that he constantly gave me money, thought Vanessa, sets the table. Today about his wife, I will forgive the children, as he told me, they have no children. So there will be no problems in the divorce. Finally, the bell rang, and the hostess opened the door. She flung herself at the man's neck. Robert, I missed you so much through tears, said the girl. You know I probably can't go on without you. I can't even get through a day without you. What are you, my love? Robert kissed her. I love you very much too. How are we going to live from now on? She looked at him with innocent eyes. You're married, aren't you? You have a family. But I am married, yes, answered the man. But unfortunately, I don't have a family. Maria, and I didn't work out. And what are you going to do now? The girl asked with interest. After so many years of life, you will file for divorce? Exactly. Robert hugged his new girlfriend. I do not see any obstacles to our divorce. We have no children, we have nothing to share. Maria will leave my house with nothing. And if she sues, Vanessa thought, she could win it and take something away from you. Well, that's unlikely. Her lover reassured her. Maria's only been working for the last 3 years, and before that she lived entirely off me. So any division of property is out of the question. The family was and is fed only by me. She spends her pennies on pocket change. Well, that's good. The girl exhaled. I love you so much that I don't even know how I can live up to your divorce. She burst into tears. Vanessa, but everything will be all right. Robert hugged her. You'll just have to wait a couple months. Vanessa and her lover spent an unforgettable evening. The man for the weekend decided to stay at her place, but on Saturday he still had to go to work. Robert here was told that by the man from the mill on the phone. They won't pay for the flour here. They say there's another mill in town, and they're charging a lot less. They want you to give it to them at the same price. What's this nonsense? The owner was cursing. Who could open a mill there? He was surprised. All right, I'll be there soon. Robert, dissatisfied, drove to work. There were already several people gathered outside the mill. None of the customers wanted to pay the price he had set anymore. What kind of lawlessness are you doing here? The mill owner shouted unhappily. Either pay what I said, or get the hell out of here. I won't give you the goods. On what grounds? The man with the mustache answered him. I brought you my wheat, what are you doing here? You're the one who's pushing the sacks around here. You'll never lift a finger. With all your men working for nothing. You want to keep my flour for a fair price. Let that sin be on you, but remember, no one will ever come to you again. At the new mill, the prices are almost half what you're paying. And the owner is a good man. The man turned around and left. The others argued some more and left too. Robert Evil looked at his men and scattered the sacks in anger. Finally, he calmed down a little and approached one worker. Where is this bloody mill located? He asked. What kind of asshole gets in my way? I'll show him. Yeah, I don't know, the young guy shrugged. They say somewhere on Novorossiyskaya, but I'll deal with them now. Quickly, the owner jumped into his car. I'll show them who's boss. It took Robert an hour to find the new mill. He jumped out of the car and sped through the gate. What are you doing here? Shocked, asked the man. Do you work here? Imagine that, someone answered him. Why are you here? I don't need your orders. So you're the one who started the new mill. Robert shouted in anger. You bastard. Why is that? A man in his 50s answered him. I don't call you a bastard for living in a house bought at my expense for most of your life. How dare you? The guest raised his hand at him. I'll take you right here by the soul. But come on, try it. The owner of the new mill grabbed his hand, so hard that he cried out in pain. Let go, you idiot. You'll break my arm. Robert tried to get away. I hate you so much. You're just the same as you were. You're just the same as you are now. Why did your grandmother give birth to you? It's not up to you to decide who lives and who doesn't, his uncle said. So go on, get out of here. I'm not meddling in your business. You're a bastard who's trying to price me out. The nephew was angry. If you don't calm down, you'll see what I'll do to you. I'm the boss here. That's why I set the price I want. Eugen answered. And the fact that you have no conscience and you steal from people. It's got nothing to do with me. I'm your bastard, Robert hissed. And your mill to hell's bedroom you'll see. And I'll get nothing for it. The man started his car and drove at full speed to his mother's house. She was cooking in the kitchen and wasn't expecting her son. Robert's son, what's wrong? Concerned. His mother asked him, You don't have a face on you. Did your wife drive you crazy? What's my wife got to do with it? He said in anger. It's your brother. God, why isn't he dead yet? Eugen said in amazement to her mother. What does he have to do with it? What has he done to you? He opened his own mill and set low prices there. That's why no one wants to come to me with anger now, replied the son. What a bastard, underhanded broad, Lily said. Well, I'll show him. You'll show him what? Robert said with annoyance in his voice. After the death of your administrator, we have no such connections in the city. Let's hire some guys to show him. The woman's eyes lit up with rage. In fact, let them kill him. How much do I hate him? It won't work. Strictly looked at her son. Suspicion will fall on us, and I'm not going to jail for that idiot. Then what are we going to do? Lily was worried. He's not going to close his mill now, is he? That's why we're going to start a fire, Robert smiled. It's an old building, so it could easily happen there. You want to burn down his mill? The mother looked at her son in astonishment. Robert, I won't let you do such a thing. But I won't do anything myself, he said, rubbing his hands together. I have a man in mind. He will organize it all. It is necessary to do everything carefully so that we are not suspected. Well, all right, agreed the mother. Just be very careful, or it's true. We'll go to jail for such an idiot. He's not worth it. Robert Lucky went back to his mistress. Images kept flashing in his mind of the new mill going up in flames. The man parked his car and ran into the entryway. Vanessa was already waiting for him. "Robert, darling, what happened to your care?" she asked the man. "You left so abruptly that I didn't even know what to think about." "Yes, I had some urgent business to attend to," Robert replied. "But now I am completely free for you." He kissed the girl. "That kind of thing." Vanessa didn't stop. "Something serious? Can you get hurt?" "Not anymore," he smiled. "Some bastard crossed my path, so I put him in his place." "Sweetheart, were you threatened?" "I wanted to get the information I needed." "Vanessa, they're bandits." "No," Robert laughed. "It's just that there's a new mill in town, and he's charging a very low price for the service. That's why all my customers went to him. But it's all right now, don't worry. One of these days, that new mill's just gonna burn down. You lost all your customers." Vanessa interrogated him with annoyance. "What's to be done now?" "You have no income." "Yes, I will solve this issue one of these days." Robert calmed his beloved. "So don't worry." The girl really didn't like what had happened. She realized that Robert was not as reliable a lover as she would have liked. He could lose everything in an instant. "Okay, I'll wait," Vanessa said to herself. "If things don't work out with him, I'll dump him right away. Why do I need him without money? I don't need a guy like that. You meet a lot of them on the street." Robert stayed with Vanessa all night. The man decided that when his wife called him, he'd go home. So he decided to forget about all his troubles and indulge in bodily pleasure with his beloved. "Vanessa, how I love you," he whispered to his mistress. "I will dawn soon, and we will definitely be together." The girl looked into his eyes, but in her mind she had other plans unfolding. "Robert, I got on the bus." His wife called him. "I'll be home in 2.5 hours." Maria really didn't want to go home. It wasn't that she dreamed of staying in the village, but her dislike for her husband was growing so strong by the day that she didn't even want to see him. "Maria, if it has come to the point of disgust, then you should give it all up already," the father told his daughter. "It won't do any good. You know how many times your mother and I didn't fight, how many times we were angry with each other. But it was anger. There was never any hatred between us." "That's true," Wendy confirmed. "I always divorced your father in language, and then, when we calmed down, I realized I didn't want to live without him. I never wanted anyone else. I realized that I have driven myself into my own trap," sighed my daughter. "I wanted an easy life, but as it turned out, everything has to pay for it. An easy life is just an illusion. It never is. It just seems that if you have a wealthy husband, there will be no problems in your life. But I've been paying for my Robert's security all these years. I put up with all his mistresses, his greed, which has started to show, especially in the last few years. I've spent so many years trying to ignore his mother's insults. What's the point of all this? I'm not swimming in butter. I basically have nothing behind me. All my suffering isn't worth it. So when you get here, file for divorce right away. There's no point in dragging it out," summed up my father. "You won't be on the street, and you won't be without a piece of bread. If you want, you can come and live with us. Know your mother, and I will help you as much as we can." Maria was on her way home, and she had a very strong desire to break up with Robert that very day. She did not want to wait any longer, neither until his anniversary nor after. "I will come and tell him at once," Maria thought, "whether he wants to or not. I don't care if it goes on any longer. It can't." Maria opened the door to Robert's apartment. The house was still empty. She sat down tiredly on the bed and began to estimate how many things she had to take with her. Furniture was out of the question, although she had bought the kitchen set entirely at her own expense. Let it stay with his new wife, she smiled. If only he would leave me alone. 2 hours later, Robert arrived. His wife called him into the kitchen. Husband puzzled. Robert looked at her. "I think you realize that our family no longer makes sense," Maria said calmly. "So it's better for us to divorce by mutual consent." Ted seriously delayed his husband to think over how he should act now. Robert, of course, was going to divorce his wife, but he planned to make sure that it was his initiative. The man was very afraid that Maria might vilify him, and his ego did not allow this in any way. I don't think such things can be solved so easily, he objected. They are resolved coldly, said the wife, especially when the husband has had mistresses throughout his married life. I have something to present to the court. Maria, yes, they were just romantic encounters. Robert protested. Did they prevent us from living together? I don't care what you call your mistresses. His wife answered him angrily. But I won't stand for it any longer. Tomorrow, I'll take the application to court. I have no claim to any of your property. About this, you cannot even worry, but she wants to divorce you before the anniversary. My mother was yelling into the phone. How dare she humiliate us like that? Ungrateful bastards. Robert, until your anniversary is over, a divorce is out of the question. Please ask her to wait. And at your birthday party, I'll give her a party. So she won't even want to stay in town for the embarrassment. Leave it to me. Robert realized that his mother had planned the grand celebration to promote him out of himself, so to speak. And now she could have everything fallen apart. The man approached his wife again. Maria, I beg you to hold off on the divorce until it has passed. My anniversary, the husband said dryly. You know what an embarrassment that would be for us, don't you? No, replied the wife briefly. We'll get what you deserve. Both you and your mother have lived at other people's expense all your lives. I will not wait. I'll take the papers. Tomorrow, Robert was desperate. First, he got in trouble because his uncle had started a new mill. Now he realized his wife was leaving. The man called his mother again. All right, I'll talk to her myself. The mother finally made up her mind. I'll talk her into it. You can be sure. A few minutes later, Maria's phone rang. She saw her mother-in-law's number. At first, Maria didn't want to pick up the phone, but she had so much anger against her that she wanted to say something to her. Maria heard her. You and Robert have the right to decide what you want to do. But I'm asking you to hold off on the divorce until after the anniversary. I've never asked you for anything. Just do my first and last request. And it was true. Lily was not the kind of person to ask, especially not from Maria. She was astonished and agreed to her mother-in-law's request. Thank you. Only just answered Robert's mother, and hanging up the phone, reveled in their victory for a long time. Well, I'll show you on anniversaries. You'll see at my place. What does it mean to deal with me? The next day, Maria was in no mood to go to work. She was so anxious to get it all over with. And now she had to wait almost 3 more weeks, Maria. But she didn't blame herself for that. Her friend told her, when she called her at lunchtime, that you would fulfill her request and let the rest be on their conscience. Lucy, I don't want to see him like that anymore. Through tears answered Maria. Now I do not understand how I could live with him. Every day he's wearing lipstick, and it's like being sprayed with that stinking perfume. Well, you don't care now. Lucy objected. What do you care now who he's giving his romantic dates to? She laughed. You're just mad at yourself and feel guilty about everything. You feel like it could have been avoided, but it really couldn't. If you hadn't been through all that, you wouldn't be seeing all this now. So it was a lesson you had to learn. Oh, Lucy, I wish I could look at life the same way, she sighed. I can't breathe because the pain inside is so tearing. I can't breathe. It's okay. All this will pass and much faster than you think. Maria encouraged the woman. After talking to Lucy, the friend felt lighter. In general, Lucy was often for her both a psychologist and a psychotherapist. On this day, the working day ended very quickly, and all because Maria really did not want to go home. She delayed leaving until the last minute, but it was already 6:30, and there was nothing more to do at work. I'll go to the park, Maria decided. It's still light outside. Maybe a walk would calm me down a little. I don't want to go home if only someone knew. But Maria's worries, on the one hand, were not justified. Robert was now spending all his nights with his mistress. His wife never saw him at home. Sometimes he called her if he had any questions. And Maria finally began to fall asleep at night, not afraid to hear her husband come home. Robert, on the other hand, was going through a period of problems, and the man was trying to get out of it all. He finally found a man who could do the arson for him. For almost a week, his mill had been out of business, with no one coming to crush grain for him. Robert was also hurt by the fact that Maria was the first to decide to leave him. It had left him with no peace. Even though he was with Vanessa now, he felt vulnerable all the time. No Maria had ever left him before, and that was with his mistresses. And here it was his wife who had taken the initiative. Earlier, when they had talked about divorce, Robert had realized that it was all nonsense. He was very easily manipulated by Maria, but now it was serious. "She wants to leave me," sounded the arrogant voice in his head. "Who the hell is she?" "Some Maria from some godforsaken village. You should thank me for the rest of your life for marrying you." "You idiot. I'll take everything away from you." But then Robert remembered that Maria had no claim to any of his property, and that made him feel even more hurt. "What's the matter with you?" Vanessa hugged him. "You're always so angry. You still haven't managed to solve the problem with the new mill. What's Robert come to?" "No, there's nothing wrong with it. I'm just trying to work things out with my wife." "What's the problem?" "She doesn't want to file for divorce." The girl asked curiously. Naturally, such a tidbit to lose. Arrogantly laughed the man. "Yes, she is at my feet, asking me not to leave her." "Why are you so wary?" "Vanessa, you're not divorcing her. She's holding her breath. Who needs her?" Robert looked at her. "I'm sick of that country bumpkin. You have no idea how tired I am of her. I even blocked her number. She's always calling me and crying, so I'll just stay with her. She comes to my work all the time." I got Robert crawling on his knees in front of me. "But something has to be done about it." The mistress gave him a stern look, "Or she'll give us a hard time. She'll be sleeping under our doors. Don't worry, I'll put it all away soon." The man kissed her. "Everyone should know their place. You're my queen." "What is she?" "A pig farmer. She's lived among pigs all her life. No beauty in her, no nurture." "Robert, I can't understand why you married her at all." Vanessa asked in amazement. "Do you think I wanted to?" The man laughed. "Yes, she got me drunk and seduced me. And then she chased me for 2 months, blackmailed me that she was pregnant by me. Her father filed a police report for allegedly raping her. Do you know how much trouble they've caused me? Why do you think we don't have kids?" "Because I've never slept with her. I don't eat her." "All right, let's say you did. You married her," the girl reasoned. "But why did she have to put up with it for 10 years? After a couple months, it was clear she wasn't pregnant. So we could have divorced her right away. But Vanessa, that Maria has made my life a living hell." Robert said pitifully. "Do you know how many times Maria cut my veins? She blackmailed me. If I could have done it before, I would have divorced her a long time ago. But now it's gonna be okay." She kissed a man. "Girl, trust me. You'll be happiest with me. Soon you'll divorce her, and we'll have a new life." "Vanessa, I don't need anyone else but you." Robert hugged her. "You're all I've got, and this Maria, she can go to hell. I don't even want to think about her. No one can keep us apart." Vanessa was very pleased with herself. It seemed to her that Robert was on the hook. She didn't even think that it would be so easy for her. The girl felt that the man was willing to do anything for her. Vanessa heavy herself with dreams that soon she would move out of the rented apartment to Robert, persuade him to sign his apartment over to her, and then her game would be over. The man wasn't as rich as she would have liked. Therefore, the girl was not going to spend her whole life on him. Maria waited for her husband's anniversary as a kind of verdict. She had a strong feeling that something would happen on it. She was cautiously waiting for the birthday, her spouse at work. Everything went on as usual. One day was followed by another. It was Thursday when Maria was on her way home from work. She took it slowly, not paying attention to the fact that it had started raining fall rain outside. Maria stopped outside her house. God, it's like a prison to me now. She looked at her driveway. One thing I'm glad Robert's not coming over tonight. But it still stopped saving me. How I wish I could call a cab, load up my stuff, and go wherever the hell I wanted to go. Maria walked into the entryway and reluctantly went up to the 3rd floor. She opened the door to her apartment and hesitated. Maria was about to enter when suddenly she heard quick, heavy footsteps downstairs, and a strange man appeared in front of her. Robert lives here. He asked unhappily. I need him urgently. Go get him. Hello. Surprised was all the landlady could say. I'm probably going to upset you, but I don't think he'll be home right now. Who are you? The stranger looked at her angrily. Are you his wife or? Neither. Maria answered indifferently. We're going through a divorce, so I can't tell you anything about his whereabouts. He's probably with his next mistress. I'm sorry. The man has come to his senses. I can talk to you. This is a very serious matter. I've been surprised by Maria. If you want to ask me about Robert, I can't help you. I really don't know where he might be, she answered tiredly. Still, let me ask you a few questions. The stranger insisted. I am, unfortunately, Robert's uncle, and he is not at all embarrassed by our relationship. Are you, Eugene, in shock? Interrogated the landlady. Well, come in, but I really don't know how to help you. I believe your name is Maria, asked the woman. The man, when he came in. I wasn't at your wedding. In fact, I wasn't invited. I'll be honest with you. I have so much conflicting information about you that I don't even know what to believe, she sighed. Lily never had a good word to say about you. How long have I known her? She hated you all the time, but I don't quite understand why. Because she doesn't have a single reason, sighed the guest, and sat down in the chair offered to Maria. She's been arrogant all her life. I don't know how she got married with such a temper. Alex was under her heel for almost 8 years, and then one day he was found dead near the house. To this day, no one knows what happened to him. According to the doctor's conclusion, his heart had stopped Lily. All the juices had drained out of him. She did not let him die. He went to work and had some time off from her. She didn't work anywhere. In fact, you could say her sister married herself off to him. The guy didn't want to marry her. Wow. Maria looked at Eugene in amazement. You can't tell from her. She tells everyone what a difficult life she had, how she raised 2 children by herself. When Alexa's husband died, I felt sorry for Robert, I sighed. I was only 18 years old at the time, so I immediately got a job on a construction site instead of Alex. I gave almost all the money I earned to my sister. It was later I found out that in those years she, it turns out, had a sponsor on the side. After her husband died, she quickly buried the director of the forestry, who also brought her money. That's why she hated me. I knew about all her lovers, and she couldn't do anything about it. My sister used the tactic, best defense, offense, and tried with all her might to smear me. Unfortunately, she also turned her children against me, although they'd both look like her so selfish and inhumane grew up. So the fact that I have no relatives, I have not lost anything. And your mother? Careful. Maria, Eugene asked. Was she still alive then? No. With annoyance in his voice, he answered. Mom died shortly before Elk's husband died. Mom was a very nice person. It's not clear who she gave birth to such a monster. Maria sank into her thoughts while her guest drank tea. She realized that everything she had thought about her husband and his mother had not appeared to her. It was all really so, and to expect her to be happy with him was ridiculous. Maria, I didn't want to talk to you to discuss my sister. Eugene finally spoke up. Robert is such an idiot that in his blindness he even went to the crime. Did he kill someone? Shocked, said Maria. I always thought he was a coward. That's because he's a real coward. He wanted to commit arson, answered the guest. Do you understand? I happen to be lucky enough to open a mill on the other side of town. I myself know how people live here, so I set very democratic prices for my work. You need an influx of customers to keep people paying. I first expected to lower the price to the lowest level to attract people, and then I planned to raise the prices by 10%. After all, I need to pay people a salary. No one will work for me for free. So even those increased prices, I was going to set almost twice as low as Robert's mill. He found out there was another mill in town, and he came to me to make his case. They can make idle threats with their tongues. It runs in the family. And tonight my watchman caught one of them. He was going to set fire to my mill. Of course, nobody else wants to do it but Robert and his mother. They don't have much imagination. That's why they decided to get the competition out of the way, so to speak. I haven't filed a police report yet. I wanted to talk to him first, and if he doesn't come to his senses, I won't feel sorry for them anymore. I honestly don't know where he is. After finishing the story, the guests answered the hostess. Robert hasn't slept at home for a week. After I told him that I would file for divorce, his mother asked me to wait until his anniversary. She's going to throw a huge banquet. She is the one who can only self-promote, laughed Eugene. I'd advise you to be careful with them. They are rotten-hearted people. They don't recognize anyone but themselves. Unfortunately, I realized it too late, Maria sighed. Almost 10 years wasted. But nothing is for nothing. The man supported her. You know, at first I was very angry with myself that 3 years as a slave worked for Leica. But then I saw that in this situation I'm right, not her. And whatever she says about me, God knows the truth is on my side. And she'll get what she deserves in due time. All right, I'm sorry to pry into your soul with my problems. You need to sort yourself out. I'll keep an eye on Robert at his mill. It's just that I'm working as a handyman myself. I can't hire many people yet, so I have to work like everyone else. The man thanked Maria for the tea and left the apartment. She looked after him for a long time. Yes, for so many years there were legends about what a scoundrel and a cheat Eugene was. But in fact it turned out to be the opposite. She thought. So it's true about Lily's receptionist's lover too. Having lovers runs in the family. It must have been a rule their mother had instilled in their family. Maria smiled at her thoughts. Maria closed the door and sat down tiredly on the sofa. She had the feeling that she had been deceived for many years. And today she had finally learned the truth. Everything had come to a head. The divorce was already a done deal for her. Nothing else could turn Maria back. She would never have a normal life with Robert. To the woman's surprise, her husband came home that evening. He was looking for some documents. Maria didn't really want to get involved in his affairs, but something prompted her to start talking to him. Your uncle came today. She looked at her husband. He wanted to talk to you. What did he want? Robert asked dismissively. The bastard still came to my house. He caught some man in the night who wanted to set his mill on fire. Coldly pronounced his wife. So he, before he wrote a police report, wanted to talk to you. Robert turned pale. He had been told that everything that needed to be done last night had already been put under the mill, and that all that was left was to throw a match in the right place. How did you catch the shock? Asked the man. He had already been to the police. Terrified, he whispered. I don't think so, replied indifferently. He's got a wife. That's why he was looking for you, to talk to you. Robert stared at his wife. His eyes were running from side to side and sweat was beading on his face. He said nothing more to Maria and ran out of the apartment. What an idiot. The man swore as he got into the car. I'll show you now. He wants to write a police report on me. Robert drove the car toward his uncle's house. It was almost 10 o'clock. When he knocked on his front yard, You bastard, why did you come to see my wife today? He shouted loudly. Did you want to rape her? Or have you two been having a love affair for a long time? Eugene expected everything from his psychotic nephew, but not this. The man looked at him in shock. I ask you, what is it with you and my little one? Why did you come to see her today? The neighbors told me everything. Robert's eyes burned with rage. You bastard, you slept with my wife. Answer me. Eugene realized that a normal conversation with his nephew could not take place. Tomorrow I will file a police report on you. He answered briefly. I'm fed up with your madness. There will be an attempt to set fire to my mill and slander against me and your wife. Eugene went into the yard and closed the gate. Robert pounded on it for a long time, shouting something. Then he jumped into the car and drove home. He shouted from the doorstep, It's fast, come here. Her husband ordered her. The wife was already asleep when she heard his inhuman scream. Shocked, she went out to him. Robert's hair was disheveled. There were convulsions running all over his body. Maria, I found out everything, he finally said. So that's the real reason for the divorce. You cheated on me with my own uncle. Robert, you're out of your mind. Maria stared at him in amazement. Do you have any idea what you're talking about? I went to see him and he confessed everything to me, screaming like a madman her husband. How could you? And he suddenly slapped her across the face. What kind of bitch are you? Get out, Maria screamed at the top of her voice. I'll call the police and an ambulance to take you to a mental institution. That's where you belong." Robert seemed to come to his senses a little. He'd been staring at his wife since my birthday. "I don't want you in my house," he said angrily. "I hate you so much. You slept with him for so many years." As soon as I threatened him, he confessed everything to me. "What kind of a bitch are you?" Robert slammed the door and quickly ran downstairs. Maria stood there like a slob. She couldn't understand what had happened. Now, at last, she covered her face with her hands and cried. Could Eugene have said such a thing to him? Was her brain exploding? He seemed like an adequate man to me. God, what had I gotten myself into? Now this idiot will tell everyone that I cheated on him with his uncle. Maria spent the rest of the night in the kitchen drinking valerian. She couldn't come to her senses. Today, I'll go to the mill to Eugene and talk to him. She's made up her mind. Jesus, I don't know what's going on. Who's stupid and who's normal? The next day, Maria barely made it to work. She was pale and could barely stand on her feet. "Maria, go home." The boss let her go. "I can see that you are not feeling well." Maria wanted to go home first. Then she turned around and walked to the bus stop to get to the other side of town. It was about 10 o'clock when she finally found the new mill. Maria was feeling very tired. So when she entered the mill grounds, she almost fell down. "Are you sick?" Some man with a broom picked her up. "Let me put you on a chair." "Thank you." "I'm all right," the guest said quietly. "Could you please call Eugene your boss for me?" "Now wait," answered the guy, and, throwing the broom, ran to some tall building. In about 20 minutes, Eugene appeared on the street in his work clothes and covered in shot dust. "Maria," the man was surprised. "What's wrong?" "You just don't have a face, Eugene," she began, and, unable to stand it, burst into tears. "You told Robert yesterday that we were having an affair. He came to me at night, accused me of cheating, said that you confessed everything to him. What kind of nonsense is that?" The man was angry. "When will all this shit out of my life?" He couldn't take it anymore and swore. "By God, they're all sick in the head. They're all in the Neuve house. He came to see me late last night. Probably after you told him I had him." That asshole was screaming like crazy all over the street. First, that I wanted to rape you. Then that we've been lovers for years. I didn't say anything to him. All I said was I'd go and report him to the police today for attempted arson and slander. And that was it. God, he's really crazy. I could barely pronounce Maria. He threw all the blame on me. Now it turns out he's divorcing me because I cheated on him with you. Not because he's had women on the side for 10 years, but because he made up a story about what a mean bitch I turned out to be. I told you they were a family of moral assholes. The man sighed. "You should stay away from them." "Well, God be with them." "Maria, I'm sorry, but I'm starting to worry about you. I realize that you are quite a normal, adequate person. It's a hell of a lot easier to break someone's psyche with this. Wait for me here. I'll be back soon," asked the mill owner. Maria couldn't help it. Tears kept running down her cheeks. She was in so much pain. She couldn't understand then how one could lie and break another person's fate so easily. Phew, out of breath, Eugene came running. "Let's go. You need to come to your senses, because you're going to be so depressed you will need months to get out of it. Besides, I know the case, and it will be easier for you to discuss it with me." Maria obediently followed Eugene. She realized that it would be very difficult for her to understand and accept it all. "But let's order some hot tea and something sweet to lift our spirits. And then, if you're hungry, we'll ask for something more serious." A man sat a woman at a table in a cafe. Maria looked around indifferently. She was in such a deep depression that she wanted to cry all the time. They brought hot tea, and the woman seemed to start to come to her senses. "Maria, there's really nothing new in all this." Eugene looked at her. "These are psychological traps for the mind. They are already 1,000 years old. First of all, always attacking first. What's in it for Robert and his mother? But we stay in complete shock for a while. So we become easily manipulated. That is, we become somewhat weak-willed. Now the big question is, where does this inner pain come from? I mean, why are we so hurt by their lies? Because we're always focused on other people's opinions and not our own. It's not that Robert is a complete fool that hurts you. It's that others will believe his slander. But I never did that, Maria said through her tears. I have not given him a single reason to doubt me in 10 years. Exactly. You have built up certain ideas about yourself. Eugene supported her. And in your opinion, you are worthy? Maria is a good wife. But does Robert's lie change anything? No. For you, the truth remains the truth. But now there are other people at play. That's the problem. You need to prove to others that it's a lie. And the more important question is, do we have to prove anything to anyone if we know the truth? No, those who are ready will accept the truth. And those who are not ready will never be able to accept it. No matter what you do. Do you understand? I think so, don't you? Maria's eyes shone. Because whatever Robert says I didn't do, but for some reason I start to act like it's true. I feel ashamed of something I didn't do. I'm afraid that other people will think badly of me. That is the biggest problem with lying. Eugene looked at her. It's not your fault, but for some reason you feel guilty for something you never did. Do you know how much I suffered when my favorite girl died on a construction site? It's one thing for people who work with you to spread gossip, but it's another thing for people closest to you to make it up. And it seems like there's nothing you can do about it. After all, everyone knows that you communicate with them. You trust them and tell them what you do not tell outsiders. And there is an illusion that relatives know not only more, but know all the most mysterious details of your life. That's why you need to trust their information. When Helen crashed, she made up the most unbelievable stories. I struggled with this for years. At first, in her version, I wanted to rape Helen before the wedding. But she didn't want intimacy with me. Then she had another version, that Helen was cheating on me, and I dropped it myself. I just did it so carefully that no one could prove it. I was in so much pain at the time from losing someone I loved. But my sister took advantage of that and tried to break me psychologically. If I had drunk or killed myself then, she would have felt the happiest because it would have proved her superiority, her power. It's the same with Robert. He doesn't care about you at all. All he cares about is that he's always on top. He can never be wrong. That's what my friend Lucy tells me. Maria replied, I understand what you're saying. I just can't put it into the right words. You know, almost all my life I've been fighting with them, trying to prove something to them, the man continued. But all the time I made the same mistake. I thought that these people could ever understand me. Maria, now I can say with absolute certainty that it will never happen. It's simply impossible. They're incapable. They live in their own imaginary world and will never let anyone and anything get them out of there. They will fight everyone to the last, just as long as they don't admit they're wrong. And then what do? Maria reasoned. We have to get on with our lives. There is only one way out, answered Eugene. Let them live their lives. You know how hard it was for me at first not to react to all this nonsense. But I made a great effort. At that time, the movie language became the sharpest knife. It cut me mercilessly. But after a few years, it realized that it no longer had that effect on me. My sister then began to make up even more incredible things. And since it seemed crazy from the outside, a lot of people started to turn away from her. And so a very promising lover left her for her delusions. How mad was she at me then? Of course, she soon had the receptionist on her hook. But still, when I stopped responding to them altogether, my business took off. I had a good income. I was able to buy a mill, which is a very promising business for our town. I wasn't going to compete with Robert. I didn't even know anything about his prices at all. A few days after I opened my business, people started coming to me and telling me how Robert was overcharging and bullying his workers. It all happened by itself. Maria listened attentively to her interlocutor, and her mind became clearer and clearer. It seemed to her that she and Eugene were in some ways alike. Only the man had already been through a lot, and she had not. She only had to face all the perfidy of Robert and his mother. After the meeting with Eugene, Maria began to pack her things. She rented a small apartment near her work and moved in. But Maria didn't have enough experience yet to see all the games of her husband and Lily. Maria, where are you? Her husband asked excitedly when he discovered in the evening that neither his wife nor her things were in the apartment. Robert, I'm filing for divorce tomorrow, she calmly replied. After what you arranged yesterday, I don't need your anniversary or your mother. Maria, but you promised. Her husband pressed her. How can I do business with you if you don't keep your word? Robert, that's enough. Maria said dryly. I will not play your games anymore. Do what you want. The man was very puzzled. First, he felt on top of the fact that he had come up with such a cunning plan with Maria. The cause of the divorce was now his wife, and he was left completely untarnished in the whole affair. But it all had to be shown in public on his birthday, and now Maria was out of his control. Robert picked up the phone and called his mother. Lily was absolutely thrilled with his plan. It couldn't have worked out any better. Son, she rejoiced, Maria was cheating on you with Eugene. It's such a great plan, and everyone's gonna know about it at the anniversary party. Mom, but there's just one problem, replied the son, with annoyance in his voice. Maria left me. She's going to file for divorce tomorrow. What should we do now? The mother was silent for a while. She realized that she could not avoid talking to Maria. A few minutes later, she was on the phone. Maria's daughter-in-law did not answer her call. Then Lily started calling her every 5 minutes. Finally, Maria couldn't take it anymore. Maria, Robert's mother sobbed at the top of her voice. How could it be? I thought you and my boy would make up soon. I want you to live with him so much. Who needs him but you? In fact, Robert's been crying all day today because you left him. I'm not going back to him, Maria said coldly, so don't waste your time. Maria, I really beg you, please don't leave us at the anniversary. Stammering with tears, said Lily. Please do what you want after Robert's birthday, but don't leave us for the anniversary after he accused me of cheating on him. Cheating with his own uncle. I won't go for it. Maria said no. So you're on your own, Maria. But you're an adult, Maria, like a snake, whispered mother-in-law. But if you won't be at the anniversary, everyone will think it's true. And if you come, so Robert won't blabber in anger, you'll prove to everyone that you've always been faithful to him. You're a good wife. Maria didn't understand why. But she agreed again. Lily's arguments were so obvious that she just gave up. All right, Maria finally said. I will come to the anniversary as Robert's wife, and that will be my last role. But I'm not going back to my husband's apartment. Maria, my dear, thank you. Robert's mother was filled with gratitude. I promise you that my son will not persecute you anymore. The main thing is that you will be present at his anniversary as his wife. And then you can file for divorce. Maria felt threatened again after talking to her mother-in-law. She called Eugene, who had left her his phone number today. Maria, I wouldn't do that if I were you, he replied excitedly. But on the other hand, maybe for people like them it will be the last chance. In any case, if you feel you are in trouble, or if you don't even have anyone to talk to, call. Anything I can do to help. Robert's anniversary was just days away. Maria had calmed down a bit by then. She was living in a rented apartment, and her confidence was slowly returning. The day before the anniversary, she received a phone call from Robert. Hi, Maria. He greeted his wife in a gentle voice. Are you ready? I cannot without you. Her husband laughed out loud. I'll pick you up tomorrow. Give me your address then. Robert will meet at the restaurant. Indifferently, the wife replied. You don't have to meet me. I'll drive myself. All right, agreed the man. What time should I expect you? Let's make it 7:30. Robert could hardly control himself. He had so much on his plate lately that he could hardly cope with it all. His mill, you might say, was almost up. After Eugene found out about the arson, Robert took no more risks to his delight. Luckily for him, his uncle never filed a report on him. Money was running out very quickly, and he was struggling to make ends meet to give Vanessa anything. The last one was starting to weaken on him. It wasn't a big problem for Robert. The man wasn't stupid. He knew how to play with women like that, but the game had to be according to his rules. Naturally, he promised the girl Golden Mountains, like all her predecessor. But he always gave his mistresses a little money only for pocket money. Vanessa, we are now engaged in a reorganization of our mill, he said. Girls, so you'll have to be patient for about 6 months. And then we'll have very good earnings, and we'll buy you a car right away. Robert, there's no question about it. Vanessa, of course, I love you so much and I'll wait for you. But my favorite everything will be fine, answered the man and kissed her. No, but it can't be. Robert used several tricks to get out of a relationship. One of them, the most common, was to accuse his beloved of cheating. The man usually presented some kind of irrefutable evidence. He'd also used this method on his wife. The mistress then tried for some time to prove her innocence. But Robert always remained adamant. The only thing I can't forgive, he always told his new mistress, was betrayal. His conscience never nodded him. That his own rule he was always breaking. It's all about others obeying the law he's laid down. That's why this trick worked very well. That's how he discovered most of his mistresses. For some are more vain and arrogant. He used the story of illness or situations where he was losing everything. Such women were especially not going to sacrifice their lives for a sick or penniless lover. They would immediately stop having any contact with him. Beloved, I do not even know how to tell you, but I have found a very serious disease. With tears in his voice, he said, and if I do not get a very expensive medicine, then in the coming months I will simply die. I ask you, for the sake of our love, to help me. Those were the last words Robert would say, and the girl would disappear from his life forever. There was another game he had, but it was a game the man played very rarely. Such girls on his way did not come across so often. Robert would just start stalking the girl. He kept blackmailing her that he would kill himself, that he couldn't live without her. It usually worked well with those who especially didn't want a family or a serious relationship. Such girls loved bodily pleasures and money, but they didn't want to take responsibility for them. Robert realized that Vanessa would be out of his life sooner or later, but the man had one very strict rule, which he never broke. All his mistresses were abandoned only by himself. None of them could leave him first. It was some kind of delusion or inferiority complex. But Robert never allowed a girl to leave first. Even if the initiator of the breakup was a mistress, he returned her by any means, and then he himself left. Many times the man asked himself the question why he married Maria. But he didn't know the answer. His wife was very devoted, and that was exactly what the man had always dreamed of. From the outside, it seemed completely schizophrenic. But Robert actually dreamed of such a woman who would be faithful to him always, while he would cheat on her. Robert's birthday came. Maria had been walking around with no mood since morning. It was Saturday, and she was idle. First here and there, not even wanting to look at her closet. Maria closed the chief, and actually would like to come there in a house robe, congratulate Robert and leave. But that's not going to work. I'd have to stay there for at least 3 hours. Maria tried to watch TV, but all her attention was absorbed by the upcoming holiday. She picked up the phone. "Oh, Lucy, I have a bad feeling," Maria complained to her friend. "If you only knew how much I don't want to go there." "Maria, but this is your last fight. It's always the hardest." Her friend backed her up. "After this, you'll never see them again, and you'll have a new life. You think with doubt in your voice," she said. "They've got me so brainwashed that I don't believe in anything anymore," Maria sighed. "I never thought I would want this day to vanish so badly. You just have to set your mind to it. No matter what happens, you're ready to learn your lesson. Tune Maria Lucy out, no matter what they do. You're going to get through this, and there will finally be a white streak in your life. God never gives a trial unless a person is ready for it. And that means no matter what happens. You ready for this? Break a leg, as they say. You're going to give me a coven after this. Make sure you call me." Talking to Lucy had given the woman some confidence. She sat on the couch and thought about her words. "Which means I'm actually willing to go through with this," she said loudly. "No matter what happens, I will definitely make it through." Maria put on her weekend blue dress, let her hair down, and applied light makeup. She was beautiful. Maria didn't bother hiding her hair under a hat. She just threw her coat hood over her head. She didn't want to drag herself across town on public transportation and hailed a cab. But with God, she said to herself, and dictated to the cab driver the address of her destination. Her husband was waiting for her outside the restaurant. It was obvious that he was very worried. Robert immediately ran up to his wife and helped her out of the cab. "Maria, we need to stick together today instead of saying hello," he said. "Whatever it is, Robert, happy birthday," she said with a smile. "May the gift for you be that I came here at all, and that's the best gift for me." Quickly her husband answered her, "Well, let me take you under my arm. We should enter the restaurant together." Maria felt her husband's hand touching her. The woman was immediately knocked upside down. Abdullah was cold. Her whole body began to tremble. "Maria, are you afraid?" Robert looked at her in surprise. "What are you doing?" "Everything will be fine." He patted her hand. Maria didn't answer anything. She did not fully understand what was happening to her. She really wanted to break free and run away. When the couple entered, Lily immediately ran up to them. She was playing the role of loving and caring mother-in-law. "Maria, Robert, come on in. We'll be starting soon." She greeted the children. Maria looked around. The anniversary had indeed been planned in a big way. Half of the tables were already occupied. Judging by the way people were dressed, most of them were, by the standards of a provincial town, quite wealthy or middle class, so to speak. She tried to estimate in her mind, and she got 50 people. And where did she get so much money? The daughter-in-law thought to herself, as long as I've known her. She was always whining that she didn't even have enough money for a piece of bread. Lily was going to be 60 years old this year, but despite her age, she remained a woman, prominent. Eugene was nothing like her. Not that the man wasn't handsome. It's just that his sister was short, dark-haired, and good-looking. His brother, on the other hand, was a tall, skinny blonde with dark blue eyes. Lily paced back and forth, showing off her slender figure and a few gold rings on her fingers, which she deliberately adjusted every now and then. Probably gifts from her former lovers, a thought quickly ran through Maria's mind. Finally, by 7 o'clock, everyone had gathered and the anniversary began. The festive program was led by a special team. Every now and then they brought a microphone to someone and let the person speak. "Dear Robert," one of the guests stood up. "I don't even know what words I can use to express my gratitude to fate for the fact that one day you were met by the hired Lily." The actor sang dithyrambs to the birthday boy for half an hour. Finally, he recited by heart the entire text that Robert's mother had prepared for him, and wiping in sweat from his face the fatigue. Everything was going well. The people were having fun. Maria drank a little wine and, in her tension, torturing her neck all this time, let go a little. She ate. An hour and a half passed and Maria wanted to get up and leave. Suddenly, Lily took the microphone in her hands. "Dear friends," she began, "I thank you all from the bottom of my heart. I really do have a wonderful son. And the words that we heard today say that all the trials, all the hardships that I went through in my life were not in vain. I put so much effort into my boy, and everyone who knows him can call him a man with a capital letter. And as a mother, I'm very happy. But there is one circumstance that overshadows not only my son, but also me. Unfortunately, Maria, my daughter-in-law, could not appreciate what my son did for her. She played with my boy for almost 10 years. I'm sorry, but I can't take it anymore. Maybe by telling this story in public, she'll finally have the conscience to let our family go." Maria turned pale. She wanted to get up and walk away, but her legs stopped working. Not only can't Maria have children, Lily continued. She had dishonored her family at a young age by getting pregnant by a married man. Her father forced her to have an abortion when she was 15. And my favorite son has been hoping for a miracle all these years. If you only knew how much Robert loves children. But this sensual Maria cheated on my son all these years. And if you only knew with whom, with my own brother Eugene. Since Maria cannot have children, she did it absolutely fearlessly. But my brother finally realized her devious plan, and Maria dumped him. So now she's trying everything she can to keep Robert from leaving her. My sister-in-law is playing the good wife, and now I'm bringing it all to your attention. As a mother, I can no longer bear to see my son suffer. I ask you to condemn this woman. What's the use of such a daughter-in-law? Hired men have entered the fray. Send her away. Maria felt a lump of anger rise to her throat, and she wanted to shout at the top of her voice that none of this was true. But to her surprise, she calmly got up from the table, and without looking back, left the restaurant. Eugene, are they crazy? Maria sobbed into the phone. How can you lie so brazenly? And this was to be expected, sighed the man. Maria, wait for me, I'm coming to get you. He switched to the first name. Bastards. I was cursing to myself, Gianni. You think you're not under the law? That's all right. God will get you too. 40 minutes later, Eugene found Maria in the park by the old fountain. The woman's eyes were swollen with tears. But it's all over now. He hugged her. Now it's definitely over. He can't take you anymore. The man came to Maria in old work clothes, put her in the car, and they drove to the mill. Maria, you take a walk here. We have an urgent order to finish today, and then we'll go somewhere else. You shouldn't be alone right now. Eugene and his men finished work at 10. The customers were paid very well that day, despite what his sister and nephew had arranged today. The man realized Robert was out of his mill and wouldn't last long. I wonder, and what will they do next? Pondered the man, the tractor, and the sacks. Would they have the conscience to ask for money? My birthday party ended exactly as Lily had planned. Everyone felt sorry for her and Robert, and the very last words were about tearing it down. Thank you for such an amazing evening. Shaking the woman's hand was the head of Lily's TSA. Do you need to hang on? I think after everyone found out about your daughter-in-law, she won't blackmail your son anymore, and he can finally divorce her. The man bent down to her ear and whispered softly, I'll visit you one of these days. We'll discuss everything then, he winked at the woman. Despite such a dizzying success and euphoria, Lily and Robert did not last long. After 2 weeks, the man was forced to close his mill. He began to have serious problems with his mistress. You know, Robert, you've been lying to me all this time. Vanessa declared to him, I was at your work today. You closed the mill. So you don't have any money and you won't anytime soon. Vanessa, yeah, we moved. Robert tried to save the day. We're in a different part of town now. Don't lie. The girl shouted angrily. I was told you were bankrupt. Get your things and get out of my apartment. She yelled at the top of her voice. Vanessa, darling. Robert tried. Didn't you tell me you couldn't live without me? Only if you had enough money. Vanessa answered frankly. And I don't need a beggar like you. That's it. From this day on, I'm dead to you. Robert came home in a rage. He threw his things all over the apartment in anger. Mom's run of the mill and it's over. He called Lily. Because of that black bastard, I've lost everything. How am I gonna live now? Robert, son, I'll think of something. It's cold, Mother said. Well, don't you panic. I've got a couple of sponsors in mind. So we'll organize something soon. But a month passed, then 2 months, then 6 months. And Lily and her son were still not getting along. Mom, I already owe everyone. Robert was cursing. I'll have to sell the apartment soon, when you do something about it. Did you do anything about it? His mother got mad at him. You've been hanging on my neck all your life. See, I can't do anything either. That damn director, and you're so greedy? Not a penny to me. I'm trying my best to give the co-owner of the gas station a break. But he only gives me pocket money. Maybe you should ask Eugene for money. My son suggested it. You'll cry, he'll forgive you and give you money. I heard his mill's so big, he's making a lot of money. That's out of the question. I'm not going to ask that bastard for anything. It's beneath me to bribe him. But 3 months later, when she and her son were left afloat without any means of subsistence, Lily made a pained face and drove to her younger brother's house. But I'll show you now. She scolded to herself. My son is bankrupt because of you, so you'll pay him back every penny. The cab stopped outside the big house. Lily pressed the bell. Who is it? A familiar voice sounded and the woman shuddered. I'll be right there. About 5 minutes later, Maria came out into the street. She was holding her big belly with her hands. You're in shock. Her ex-mother-in-law looked at her. What are you doing here? I live here. Maria laughed. What brings you here? Do you want your husband? My wife for you. Favorite relatives are here, she joked. Lily was completely defeated, and she realized it. But an inner impulse compelled her to fight to the end. Eugene, she threw herself, with tears in her eyes, on her brother's neck. My beloved brother. but let's not make a scene." Eugene took her hands away. "You must be in a bad way." "If you overcame your pride and came to me, Eugene, I'm so sick," continued to play comedy. "Sister, I don't have long left. For everything, I'm sorry. I'm just now starting to realize what I've done. Please, I'm sorry. I wish I hadn't died with such a heavy burden." "God will forgive," shortly replied the brother. "Goodbye, Lily. Now forever." Coldly, he said, "Will you leave me in distress?" Lily burst into tears. "I'm in such hellish pain. I need expensive medicine." "Yes." Eugene turned around and looked at his sister one last time. "Let your son treat you." He closed the door and went into the house. After Lily embarrassed her sister-in-law at the birthday party, Maria somehow waited until the end of the workday, and she and Eugene went to his house. The time was already late. The cafes were closed. "Maria, if you want, you can stay at my place after dinner. If not, I'll take you home and pay for a cab," the man offered. "Eugene, thank you for everything. But I need some time to myself," Maria answered alone. "I have to cry until all this pain and tears go away. You've done so much for me already." "I understand you," sighed the man. Unfortunately, people like that have no brakes. They think they can say anything they want and nothing will happen to them. You know, I've watched this phenomenon so many times, and I've realized that they believe what they say. They simply have no other choice. If they don't believe all this nonsense, it means only one thing to them, that they are lying. And that is a claim to their perfection. They can't allow that. So they have to believe their own nonsense. It doesn't matter if they look crazy to others. You know, it's the first time I meet such people, or at least in such extreme degree. While drinking hot tea, Maria said, "They seem to be normal people on the outside, and you expect them to act adequately. And when it doesn't happen, you can't figure out what's wrong. That's the hardest part for me. It turns out that not all people are good and kind. There are some who willfully want to destroy you, and for no reason at all. But what have I done to them? There's no reason for Robert or his mother to treat me like this, as I told you." Eugene looked at her. "There's only one way to leave them alone, and not to get involved with them in any way. You need to learn to just ignore them. They are nothing. They're just nothing. But they're very sensitive about it. How can anyone not validate their importance? They're not important. They're no different from you or me. So always presenting them as nothing, let them make up whatever they want. With their sick imaginations, you can make up anything. You just know that they mean nothing to you." After that day, Eugene started calling Maria every day. They had common topics of conversation. In fact, it seemed to Maria that Eugene had just saved her. There was some truth in that. He showed her what she had not wanted to notice before. After a few months, Zhenya and Maria became good friends. They sometimes went to cafes and constantly discussed things at work. Maria was very easy with Zhenya. 2 more months passed, and she began to feel that her new acquaintance was not just a friend for her. Maria immediately panicked. "You see, as Eugene once said, I'm 50 years old. And after Lena was gone, I never looked at any woman again. I wasn't really interested in anyone. I even thought I'd die a bachelor, but you changed everything. I need you." Eugene, trying to keep it together. "Maria, you're my best friend. I'll be honest with you. I feel something more for you, but I'm afraid. Then we'll just have to wait." The man looked her in the eye, and that's something we both know how to do. But the waiting didn't last long. 2 weeks later, Maria told Eugene, and they signed right away. Their wedding was more like a friend's dinner that the lovers organized for their people at the mill. Not 2 months later, Maria realized she was pregnant. "Eugene, it's just some kind of miracle." The woman couldn't believe the news. "God, I've waited so many years for this." "Well, it won't be the last." Her husband kissed her. "I'm still going strong. So we'll plan for at least 2. But I'd like a 3rd. "You let me at least this one," laughed the wife. "You know, as I fear, everything will be fine." Beloved, hugged her husband. "My darling, how happy am I." After his sister came to Eugene, it was as if the last thin thread had broken, and no longer with Maria. Business was booming. The owner of the mill opened 2 new shops for the production of fodder. He had good people working for him, and he did not insult them with wages. The first child Maria gave birth to was a boy. After him immediately Weather and came in a girl. Then the couple had a 2-year break, and their twins, 2 mischievous hooligans, were born. Maria, you even outdid me, laughing at your sister brother. You probably waited until you were almost 36 years old to set records. We're Estonian, and we gave birth to 3. And you and Eugene are just like pies to find them. I'm not surprised your twins won't be the last. That's good, his father said. Let at least a soccer team be born. After all, the main thing is that our Maria finally got her happiness.